Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our regular council meeting of October the 12th. So I do have a few opening remarks to make. And firstly, welcome back to Chambers. With gratitude on the lands of the Sauk First Nation, we are grateful for their generosity and hospitality as we live, learn, and work on their traditional territory. Members of the public, both here in human form and online, we thank you for taking the time to join with us tonight. We have missed you. This is the first time we've had members of the public in Chambers since March of 2020, I believe, and it just isn't the same without you here. So thank you for taking the time. We do have a long agenda ahead of us. However, I do wish to make a few remarks, and I waited for the opportunity to do this in a person-to-person form. Technology is great when it works. However, for me, it will just never replace the human interaction. Behind me, you will see a new addition to Chambers, and that is the Sauk flag, which is now flying outside our building as well. These flags mark a significant milestone in our work with the Sauk Nation, and it's a reminder of the work and challenges that lie ahead. And I'm pleased to say that council and district staff are here now and ready to embrace those challenges. On a sadder note, I do wish to acknowledge the passing of a few individuals. In the times that we have been closed, we parted and said farewell to Councillor Sheila Beach and to Councillor Lorna Berry. Sheila Beach served on council from 2005 to 2011. A talented and celebrated artist herself, Sheila was a passionate advocate for the arts and cultural organizations and local events. She believed that the arts were important drivers of tourism and economic diversification and recognized their benefit for our community as well as individual health and vitality. Sheila was actively engaged with many local organizations, including Sauk Literacy, Sauk Region Tourism Association, the Sauk Rotary Club, to name a few. She was a frequent contributor to the Sauk Fine Arts Show and can often be found demonstrating her felt-making skills as an artist in residence, quick with a smile and always willing to give an in-depth explanation of the finer points of her crafts. Sheila was always well prepared, helpful, and gave practical advice while serving on council. And she was a very proud grandmother to her granddaughter Lily, who was a frequent visitor to our chambers. Lorna Berry served as regional director before Sauk Incorporated, as well as 2 terms as a councillor from 1999 to 2005. Also a strong advocate for the arts. She advocated and sat on the Transit Commission. She worked for funding for Air Manor, and she served on council during a time of significant transition. Lorna ensured we acquired our waterfront park, known today as Ed McGregor, as well as the establishment of wastewater services, and always mindful of the impact on taxpayers. Lorna was involved with many community organizations like the Sauk Regional Historical Society, the Twinning with Port Townsend, the Longboats, the Sauk Marine Rescue Society, and many more. And while I didn't serve with Councillor Berry, I will quote former Councillor John Farmer, who said, "Lorna exemplified what all councillors should aspire to. She worked hard, was always prepared, and investigated any item on the agenda that she was not sure of." We give our heartfelt condolences to the families. I do also wish to acknowledge the passing of our longtime council watchdog, Gail Hall. I came to know Gail when we were both running for a seat on council in 2008. What I didn't know then but came to appreciate over time is Gail's no-nonsense approach to good governance. Rules of law, moral integrity, transparency, participation, responsibility, and accountability, effectiveness and efficiency were all things that Gail advocated for. In fact, we all sat up a bit straighter when Gail came up to the microphone. While quick to catch a flaw, she always recognized good work, and all her efforts, I think, were to keep us on track so we would deliver good results and good service back to the community of Sauk. I last saw Gail this past spring in April, and I'll miss her. We had a very pleasant exchange. Members of the public, it's been a challenging time since we were together in Chambers. The pandemic seemingly has unveiled all of our weaknesses, shortfalls, and gaps. The inequality that exists, the struggle of addiction and homelessness, the opioid crisis, the rise in domestic violence, the known fact that local children are arriving at school hungry, the shortage of primary health care, the need for more mental health support, and the challenges that continue to plague those in the most desperate situations. The loss of income from the pandemic has led to the breakdown of family units. Sadness and stress has followed. Folks in isolation are suffering and dying alone. And add on all of this that all is not equal and well in the world, as demonstrated by the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, Stop Asian Hate, and now for many, the shocking realization of the unmarked graves of thousands of Canadian Indigenous children. Add in the heat domes, wildfire, the climate crisis. It's all twisted together with a growing mess of social media, and it's a rather complex, layered onion. All of this can lead to a numb state of paralysis, and it's a lot for any local government to absorb. However, at the same time, while all this is happening, there is other traits have been revealed, and that is strength, kindness, and encouragement found in this unique place we call Souk. Community volunteers are just decent good folk, lending a hand to strangers, finding ways to encourage and to give. And always through every moment of this pandemic, local residents have continued to find ways to stay strong, to help one another, and to carry on. The district has not been idle, and while our work was either put on hold or disrupted, we found ways to continue delivering the services our residents rely on, wastewater, parks, land use, etc. We continue to follow all public health orders while continuing to find ways to improve on our policies. So in closing, I wish to express my gratitude to our 6 elected councillors, committee volunteers, district staff and contractors, fire and rescue crew and ESS volunteers, RCMP and paramedics, chief and council of the Sauk and Shaanu Nations, and the community volunteers, whether it's the Chamber, Rotary, Sioux Community Association, Lions Family Food Bank, Sioux Shelter Museum, Visitor Center, Literacy, the library, the list goes on, SD62, trustees and staff, frontline grocery workers, hardware, basically everyone in Sioux. We are getting through this, and while I don't know where it'll end, I know that we'll emerge stronger together. So thank you for allowing me a moment to share those words with you. So, on this point now, I'd like to go on to approval of agenda, which is item 5. And there's a few pieces. So we have 2 supplementary bits of information. There's supplemental information for 11.4, and we also received supplemental information for item 10.3. However, in regards to the item that came for 10.3, it is anonymous correspondence, and we have a council policy which was adopted back, it was one of the first policies, is 1.1, and it basically says that anonymous correspondence be filed and not forwarded to council. So we either ignore our policy, adopt a new one, and I just feel that at this time I can't support including the correspondence from the Sioux on Fire taxpayers. If the group identified themselves, that would be different, but with volumes of hate mail coming into me, I'm not prepared to accept anything from anyone that's anonymous at this time. Staff have also noted that 11.2 needs to switch and 11.4 need to move. So it's on our screen here. So what I would like to do is a motion then that the agenda for October 12th, 2021 regular meeting of council be adopted as amended with the addition of supplemental information for 11.4, Community Parks Regulation Amendment Bylaw number 823-101-6, 2021, and to move item number 11.2, Fees and Charges Amendment Bylaw number 824-752-04, 2021, to immediately follow item number 11.4. So that's moved by Councillor Logans and seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. Any questions on what we're doing? Of course, councillors, if you disagree with my ruling as chair, you can always challenge me and we'll take a vote if that's the case. But at this point, this is what we're moving. Okay, all those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, next up is item 6. 6.1, so we have a delegation tonight. It's entitled Decolonization. We have a presentation from Mr. Jonathan Francoeur. Maybe you can correct me when you come to the microphone. All delegations are awarded 5 minutes of time, and our corporate staff will put on the timer so that you know how much time is remaining, and then at the 5 minutes, we'll thank you for your presentation. So on that, I'd like to welcome Mr. Francoeur forward to the microphone.
I'm Jonathan Francoeur, and I live at 6411 Souk Road. I'm the first generation of my family to be born on Coast Salish lands. I'm a settler whose ancestors mostly came from Europe. I've met Indigenous matriarchs who've taught me, and I'd like to share what I can with you now. The 2020 Souk OCP says that in 1849, 200 acres of Souk land were sold by the Hudson's Bay Company to a Scotsman named Grant with the intention of selling the timber to southern markets. 1 year later, an agent of the Hudson's Bay Company created the Douglas Treaties that said, "Our village sites and enclosed fields are to be kept for our own use. The land itself, with these small exceptions, becomes the entire property of the white people forever." What gave the Hudson's Bay Company the right to sell the lands and the trees from the Sauk Nation a year previous? The report of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal People says the doctrine of discovery was the international law that gave license to explorers to claim vacant land, terra nullius, in the name of their sovereign. Vacant land was that which was not populated by Christians. The consequences of this way of thinking are genocidal, as described in the report on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. We can stop genocide when we give authority to Indigenous matriarchs over corporations. Clear cuts destroy the land's water holding capacity. Water is life, as stated by the rise of the Mini-Wet'suwet'en Wenoni movement in their fight against pipelines. When the water holding capacity of the land is destroyed, the waterways are destroyed, and the salmon are destroyed, and the people are destroyed by dependence on fossil fuels to import what's needed from corporations that fund armies who fight Indigenous people in other places. Colonizers used Indian Act laws against fishing salmon to undermine local Indigenous economies here. Here, the Indian Act also forced Indigenous people onto reservations, forbade a woman from owning land when she married to a non-Indigenous man, and sent Indigenous children to residential schools where they were 5 times more likely to die than other Canadian children, banned the potlatch, through which Indigenous governance sovereignty laws are shared, imposed a democratically elected chief and council, which exists to this day, usurping in some cases the hereditary chiefs from protecting their lands from development and extractive industries. Maybe not in this nation. Arthur Manuel said to settlers, "You have a right to stay here as long as you recognize that it is our land and that we have a say over it." I think developers, visionaries, and people with big ideas should get permits and permission from the local Indigenous people who protect the land. However, where are they? I believe they have been oppressed for so long that it's still unsafe for them to come out. For example, I posted on Facebook an RCMP officer's image who targeted Indigenous youth, broke bones, and got away with it because no name tag or ID badge. We still can't get his name after over a month through the Privacy Act. My parents have not yet shared his photo because they think that the Indigenous people deserved it for fighting back, even though no one said they were fighting back. I believe it's racist thinking. I felt a shift in my way of thinking when someone asked me, "What does Indigenous inclusion mean?" My thoughts were colonial. How do I include Indigenous people? As I continued to think, my thought decolonized. How can I be included? It's the women and the children that protect the land, and it's the role of the men and the elders to protect the women and the children. Some people have intergenerational trauma from not being able to protect the women and children.
Mr. Francoeur, that's 5 minutes.
Okay.
I can ask council if you need a couple more minutes for more to wrap up.
30 seconds.
Okay. Go ahead, please.
A local matriarch said, when they realize it isn't theirs, they'll give it back. I realized that the property at 6411 Souk Road is not mine. I'm asking for your help to give it back to the women and children of the Sauk Nation who protect the land. Who have you seen standing up for land and water against developments and extractive industries? I hope that this discussion will create a safer space for local land defenders to exist. We must support the ones that still respect life and care about their land and water, not those who are competing with children for resources.
Thank you, Mr. Francoeur, for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Okay, our next item on tonight's agenda, item 7, is the report of the Chief Administrative Officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. There will be a comprehensive update on the strategic priorities chart at next Monday's Committee of the Whole. But a couple of quick things that are not on the chart that I'd like to bring Council up to speed on this evening. The first is the sport box in Sun River. The forming the rebar is in place, but there is a continuous pour of the entire floor that needs to be done at one point, at one full pour. It requires 48 hours without precipitation in the forecast, so we're working with Mother Nature to sort of schedule that right now. But the pour will take 16 hours of continuous pour. And it will be disruptive to the neighbors. So recently, last week, notes were hand-delivered to those that are most affected in the area, and hopefully that will forego some of the frustration that people up there will feel. But we've looked at all possible ways, and this 16-hour continuous pour is the only way to get this concrete into the forms. Next, just an update. I'm working with Souk Disposal Limited to work with them to store some of their equipment and trucks at our Kaltassin yards. It will require some sort of partnership agreement under Section 21 of the Community Charter. They also will be looking for an ALR exclusion for their property in Souk River Road, which will come forward to Council at some future time, but I just wanted to let Council know that at this point we're working to see if we can accommodate their needs for storage at our Kaltassin yards without interrupting a fairly vital service in our community. Next, the Lions proposal for John Phillips Memorial Park. I will be meeting with representatives from the Lions Club on Thursday this week. It's likely that in order for us to produce the concept design work for an information with the community will take some time, so we'll work through that at this meeting on Thursday, and I will keep Council up to speed on what that looks like in the coming weeks. And the last thing tonight, as I said in my email to Council and staff earlier today, after over 30 applications and 6 interviews, and input from directors, community safety staff, our IAFF executive, and Souk Firefighters Association executive, Ted Ryder has accepted our offer as our new fire chief, and Chief Ryder will be in the seat as of November 15th of this year. So happy to have that vital position filled in a really important piece of our leadership team. And that's it for this evening, Your Worship. Any questions?
And from me, thank you, Mr. McInnes. Any questions from members of council? No, we're good. Thank you for the update. Okay, our next item is item 8, and this is the public question and comment period. So this is where members of the public were welcome to address council. It would be for any item on tonight's agenda, so it has to be on the item. We just ask that you introduce yourself with your name, municipality of residence. We don't need your home address, just if you live in Souk or Juan de Fuca or wherever. And also if you could let us know which item in the agenda you're speaking to, so we can sort of connect your remarks with the council agenda item. And yes, and then every and then up to 2 minutes, of which I'll time you, and then when we run out, we'll just need to, I'll cut you off, unfortunately, like I did to Mr. Franker, just because of the timekeeping that is part of our agenda. So, on that note, I'd like to welcome anyone forward. Please come up and just press the button on the microphone stand so we can hear you. And please go ahead.
Okay. Hello, my name's William Wallace, and I live in Souk. And I'm also a member of the Souk on Fire Committee, but I'm not speaking to that piece of information. What I'm here about is $30,000 that you're talking about tonight, allocating to do design work on a structure for John Phillips Memorial Park. Quick background on the $30,000. On July 8th, staff recommended to the Souk Program for the Arts Committee that $30,000, they suggest to the council that $30,000 be used to do design work on a festival event structure. So it wasn't the committee that recommended the $30,000, it was the staff recommended to the committee. The 2006 John Phillips Memorial Park conceptual plan was referenced, and a 3-sided structure was noted on that plan. The agenda item for that meeting, there was no Lions proposal in the agenda. It was mentioned by staff to the committee, the proposal, Lions proposal, but at that time there was concerns by the committee on the location of the proposal. 4 days later, from July 8th to July 12th, the APP was announced. The announcement was for the Souk Lions Center. My question tonight is regarding the $30,000. What are the design specification details that are being put out to tender for this $30,000? And are they available for public to review? So that's really all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. We'll address that when the item comes forward for discussion later on. Okay? Other members of the public?
Do I have to press a button? I'm good? Okay. I'll just get set up here. Thank you for hearing me tonight. I'm here, my name is, excuse me, my name is Verna Anderson. I live in Souk, and I'm here tonight about John Phillips Memorial Park. I read the brochure, everything you always wanted to know about Souk, except where is John Phillips Memorial Park mentioned. In the brochure under Leisurely, Whiffenspit, Ed McGregor Park Boardwalk, Souk Potholes, French Beach Shoreline, East Souk Park Trails, Roche Cove, Galloping Goose Trail, and once again the Souk Potholes gets mentioned. Under parks and campgrounds, Souk Potholes, Whiffenspit, Ed McGregor Park, East Souk Park, Galloping Goose Trail, Souk River Flats, and many places outside of Souk area. In fairness, there was a small picture of it. This council and mayor believe this park is underutilized. Perhaps it's because it's never mentioned as a peaceful place to take a leisurely stroll or play a game of Frisbee. The brochure must have been constructed some time ago. Has the fate of this park already been predetermined? Here we have a beautiful rolling green space leading to our municipal hall, something to be proud of. Miraculous things happened to a park when the name changed from Harbor to Ed McGregor. Maybe John Phillips Memorial Park would have more protection and notoriety spent on it if we changed the name and called it Maya Tate Park. Thank you for hearing me. I hope you were listening.
That would bring lots of notoriety, I'm sure. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Other speakers? If you could let us know which brochure that is, that would be helpful.
Everything you wanted wanted to know about Souk.
Okay. I think if staff could let us know who might have, if that was a district publication or if it was who published it, that would help. It doesn't look to be one of our publications.
I'm sorry, I forgot it.
That's fine. If you're able to email us at info@souk.ca, it would just be helpful to know who the publisher of it was.
I think there's one down in your lobby.
All right, I don't enter that way, so thank you. Okay, other speakers this evening? I'll call for anyone? First time? No? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Franker.
So I can speak about decolonization, like without a script, for 2 minutes? Okay. I'm ready.
It's all right, so as soon as you start talking, we'll start timing.
Everybody walks to the beat of the same old drum. No matter where you're going or where you come from, you were created from the soil just the same as me, and you'll return eventually. What about the waters from the air to the sea? They pass through every part of you and me. And what about the magnetic energies? They pass through every part of you and me. And what about the foods we all share to eat? They pass through every part of you and me. And what about the air we all share to breathe? It passes through every part of you and me. This song is old, this song is bold, this song is everything you'll ever know. Let me tell you whether you like it or not. Everybody walks to the beat of the same old drum. No matter where you're going or where you come from, you were created from the soil just the same as me, and you'll return eventually. And what about the waters from the air to the sea? They pass through every part of you and me. And what about the air we all share to breathe? It passes through every part of you and me. And what about the foods we all share to eat? They pass through every part of you and me. And what about the magnetic energies? They pass through every part of you and me. This song is old, this song is bold, this song is everything you'll ever know. Let me tell you whether you like it or not. Everybody walks to the beat of the same old drum. No matter where you're going or where you come from, you were created from the soil just the same as me, and you'll return eventually. Do you have any questions?
No, I just forgot to get your name when you introduced yourself at the beginning, so that was if you could just finish off with your name, then that'll just complete that.
Jonathan Francoeur.
Thank you. Okay, any further comments from members of the public this evening? Last call? Okay, so we'll carry on into our agenda then. Thank you very much for those of you that spoke. Our next item is item 9, which is our consent agenda. So there's just the one item, and that is that item 9.1 be adopted by general consent. So I'll look for a mover, and Councillor Beddoes, seconded by Councillor Logans. Any discussion items? The mover, seconder, anyone? Nope. All those in favor then? And opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. So next up is item 10.1, the animal control contract renewal. So we have our staff report, and I'll just turn to staff if there's any presentation or anything to add to the report.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a brief overview of the report. It's presented tonight just for council information. During the July 26th regular council meeting, discussions surrounding the new dog park indicated that the district would be considering renewal of a CRD animal control services contract. In fact, the current CRD contract is written as a 3-year term, which does end at the end of 2021, but there's an automatic renewal clause built in for the next 2 years unless either party terminates the contract. Council had asked staff to ensure that CRD Animal Control paid special attention to the new dog park location, and we have confirmed that that falls within the existing contract. The CRD has also offered to lend us additional expertise and advice as we open the dog park above and beyond increasing their patrols. So at this point in time, an active renewal is not required as the process will be automatic, and unless council directs otherwise, staff are recommending the contract continue as is for the next 2 years. Thank you.
Okay, any questions from members of council? Councillor Beddoes?
Yes, staff, I see on page 17 that the CRD keeps a detailed record of accounts and activities in relation to the service prepared to deliver to suit not less than quarterly reports. Do they come in quarterly? I've yet to see a CRD bylaw person here, so I just needed to confirm that we are getting those reports.
We do receive them quarterly, yes. I can get you some historical ones if you'd like.
Just want to know that they're coming in, that's all. Thank you very much.
Anything else? Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, I was curious to see in the 2018 paperwork, and I think it was in the current report as well, is the District of Sauk still the busiest community with respect to dangerous dogs and dog bite incidents? Yeah.
I don't actually have that. I don't, but I can find out for you.
Okay, thank you. I'd also be curious to know where things stand with the Parks and Trails Master Plan action regarding an on-leash bylaw. That was short-term action 6.2.
Staff have been working to prioritize the short-term actions from the Parks and Trails Master Plan into our work plans for next year, so I do expect that the short-term ones will start to appear coming up in 2022.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Just over to staff, I think it would be helpful if we could have, say, the last 2 quarterly reports forwarded to the info email, and just for reference sake, if staff could provide those to council as they come in. I haven't seen one in a while, and if they went to the info, it would give us more, just to be curious how things are going, and just to dispel or any concerns or address them as they come up. Thank you. Okay, so the recommendation then is that council receive the animal control contract renewal report for information. It's moved by Councillor McMath, seconded by Councillor Beddoes. Any discussion, Councillor McMath or Beddoes? Anyone else? No? You want to discuss receiving? No. Okay. All right, all those in favor then? And opposed, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Did you have a follow-up question or something?
No, I was
The microphone.
Yeah, I was just going to roll back the years to 2019, when Ms. Dominguez was last with us, and she made some good points. She did call that night for an animal shelter in Sauk, and as you replied, I believe we're just not ready for that at this point in the municipality's history. It's a very expensive proposition. But yeah, she did want to see us take back animal control services from the CRD and run our own, in part because strays are taken to Elk Lake, and that makes it a very challenging process for dog owners. She also called for an off-leash dog park. She also called for pet-friendly developments and rentals. And we do have some new incoming projects that could be considered around that. So that's it. Yeah, I just wanted to note those points. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman. I should have allowed you more time when we had the motion on the floor. So yes, there was a staff report that answered those questions about the cost or what we would need to do to establish animal control in-house as a service, and what we would need to do. So at that time, it was cost prohibitive, and the service, there was no sort of reasoning to shift out of the CRD delivery of the service. So perhaps as we grow, it's something to contemplate, but there would be the need for land for the particular purpose to set up the kennel, the staff, the monitoring, all of those pieces. So at this point, there is the one in the region. There is, when a dog goes missing, there are things like roam and fled and social media where people do help one another get their dog back. And I think it would just be helpful statistics, because we hear a lot about people having adopted pets during COVID and a lot more animals coming into Sauk. So be curious to know if that actually is happening, if we're just seeing them out more as more folks are exploring, and sort of what we need to plan for going ahead. So having the data from the reports would be helpful. Thank you. Okay, so next up is item 10.2. This is a Sauk Program of the Arts Spa Committee recommendation regarding the memorial wall. So we have our staff report here, and then I'll turn it over to staff to take us through the report, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Report in front of Council for consideration tonight coming from SUC Program of the Arts Committee to go forward with the implementation of the memorial wall at Whiff and Spit at Quimper Park, and further recommendation for Council's consideration to fund up to $15,000, 1/3 of the project costs from the reserve account from SPA.
That's it?
Nothing further to add to the report.
Okay. So I can see in the report here that the committee did land on using not the spit itself, but the Manuel Quimper area, which is sort of overlooking the spit, and then to build something that complements the existing features of that. So that's all in the report here. So, Council, you may recall that we did look at sort of a stone type of structure that would be located on the spit itself, and we just didn't feel it met the objectives of what we were looking for. And then there were concerns about it being on the spit, so where do we put it, and so forth, and now we're back to a different area, but a different design. So, questions? Or maybe just hold it for a second. Sorry, I'm just out of order here. Procedurally, I'd just like to ask Councillor Lajeunesse to comment a bit first, because he is our liaison to the SPA committee. So if you have anything more that you'd like to add. And Mr. Carter, could you turn off your microphone, please?
So the committee, we did have several meetings where we discussed this, and we met at the spit a few times, and it was determined that building something on the spit itself, because of the storm activities and everything else, that it could be vulnerable. And so we looked at the Quimper Park location. It's an area that's been, I don't want to say neglected, but it could use a little bit of sprucing up. And it's also an area that has a good view of the spit and of the straits beyond. And so one of the committee members came up with a conceptual idea of a wall that had like sort of semi-cylindrical lighthouse attachments on both ends, and then the roof of the lighthouse kind of extended along a serpentine pattern along the wall, and that would be an area to place the memorial plaques. And this took several iterations and a lot of discussion to arrive at this point, but it was one that the committee felt would suit the purpose. And it's in the agenda package if anyone's had a chance to look at it. And this is not by any means a final design, it's just a concept that we would then put out to local stonemasons or artists and allow them the artistic freedom to work something out along these lines.
Thank you, Councillor Lajeunesse. So there's a recommendation here, but what I'll do is just start to see if there's questions. Let's get some questions flowing. So we'll start, any questions first, just on the staff report? Okay, we'll start with questions. So Councillor St. Pierre.
Just a quick question that Councillor Lajeunesse may be able to answer. I'm curious about the floating wooden seats. They're going to be more prone to deterioration in the weather and so on and so forth. Why not just go stone all the way? I'm just curious about that.
This was the member of the committee who came up with this design like that. I think their McGregor Park has something similar on some of the stonework there, and so she thought for consistency it would be nice to go with wooden seats. I realize that there's a maintenance component with that, and I'm a fan of low maintenance infrastructure, so. But we'll leave it up to the final design, I think, for that.
Okay, Other questions? Councillor Logans?
Thank you for your work with this committee and bringing it forward. I think one thing that I wanted to ask was about the original vision being like, or having a piece that you could look through. Is that something that was discussed in this design or something that you think could be incorporated potentially with the new design?
One of the things that I suggested was that it could have a hollow section in it so that you could see through it. But I think the idea is that there would be a retaining wall constructed behind it. So there would be kind of more surface area to work with, and there would be benches on the backside as well, facing the ocean. And so, but I don't see any problem with putting some windows in a structure like this.
Thank you.
Other questions? Sorry, we closed our public input session, so there's only that time at the start of the agenda to speak to council. There's no other time for public input in the meeting according to our council procedure bylaw.
I've got a question.
Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, so I do note that back in 2018, motion 404, Councillor Casper moved that council direct staff to issue an RFP for memorial sculpture created and installed on Whiff and Spit with funding to come from the SPA account. So I guess that's the question, because SPA is currently seeking just $15,000 from the SPA account to deal with the design elements and not the actual remaining $30,000. So I'm just wondering what standing a motion like that has today, or whether we just override that.
Well, I think that motion has been addressed because we sent it out to get bids following that, and then what came back, and we put forward sort of some concepts of what we were looking for, and then what came back were sort of the big rock structures. So, and then that had a price tag, I think, of around $50,000, but we didn't feel that it met the intent of this, and so that motion has actually been dealt with. We never awarded that work, and then it was the case, okay, let's just hold on, this isn't the right way to proceed, let's take it back and do some more looking into it. And then it went to the committee, and then we've just been waiting now for the committee to respond. So that motion has been dealt with now.
All right. Okay.
I think so, because we've received that first piece, and then at that time, it was pre-COVID, we heard from the community about not wanting to put anything on the spit. Accessibility was raised, the location taken away from the natural elements, all of that, the impact of weather and sea levels and all that on the spit itself. So then it left us, okay, well, where do we put this? So then I believe the committee looked at whether or not to do something more at Ed McGregor. Is that a space? And then it returned back to Manuel Quimper. And I think staff actually did bring a different report back, I think, that said, okay, how about something like this at Manuel Quimper? But we didn't like it either. It was too blocky, I think. It was just blocks. It was blocks. It was boring blocks. We didn't like that. We didn't like the stones at the spit. They were just big blocks.
I think, yeah,
And
I
we
think
felt
that
it
that
needed
was
an
just
artistic
a
impression.
placeholder, I think, that
Yeah.
staff had come up with, but they didn't have the greatest software for creating a nice rendering of a stone wall.
Yeah, hence why we need an artistic
Yes.
element, designing something to say, okay, it's not just a block, it's something more. Does that help?
Yeah, I think it does. Just with the final clause in that motion was with funding to come from the SPA account. And that would be separate to the RFP. But it's not a key thing. I know the SPA account has approximately $75,000 or so in it. But there's lots of other initiatives I'm sure SPA would like to tackle. The question through to staff is, where would that additional funding come from?
So just if I'm hearing you correctly, just a second, Ms. Gray, like Councillor Bateman, The motion that you're referring to said to come from the SPA account, and the staff report in front of us is saying, okay, that we could allocate this from the SPA reserve.
1/3 of the project costs.
Yeah, the cost of the project is expected to be $35,000 plus contingency. There's $50,000 allocated from the SPA reserve for this project in the 2022 budget. So it would all come from the SPA?
Oh, okay, sorry, I mistook that.
Is that not right? That's right.
1/3 for design, and the remaining 2/3 would be for construction.
Right, so and then all of it would come from the SPA reserve. Right. Good?
Bravo.
Okay, I'm slightly confused, but that's okay. You got your question
That's
answered.
my job.
Councillor Lajeunesse?
Yeah, so the committee was of the opinion that only the artistic aspect of the project should come from the SPA budget, and the kind of the remediation, and there were some other improvements that were talked about for that site that should probably come from the parks budget or some other funding source. So but the SPA committee has ideas for other projects that they would like to do, and they have a very limited amount of money, so that they didn't want to pour it all into this one project.
Okay, so I think part of it, and I'll have staff correct me otherwise if I'm mistaken, is that, so the design concept and all this, if council's willing, this will proceed. And then when that closes, we'll have another staff report that will come back to us that will provide more clarity. Okay, it's come in at this amount. And then we would just have to see, like I kind of think removal of invasive species probably doesn't fit. SPA Reserve has specific criteria over how those funds can be allocated, so then we'll need to have staff advise us as to what fits the SPA criteria and what doesn't. Because to me, removing of invasive doesn't fit the SPA criteria, but that's where we would need more explanation, or staff will provide that rationale and where the funding's coming from at that time. So we may have to use some contingency or another reserve, but we'll wait and see because we don't know how much it'll cost. Maybe it'll be below budget. Yeah. Okay, good. Oh, Councillor Beddoes.
Well, you can make the motion, then I'll comment on it if you want.
Okay, so we'll start with that. So the recommendation is that council directs staff to implement the memorial design concept at Whiff and Spit in 2022, so next year, and that council allocate 1/3 of the project costs, up to $15,000, from the SPA reserve to fund the costs related to the artistic elements of a memorial design concept at Whiff and Spit. So moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Bateman. So comments now. Councillor St. Pierre, you moved it. You have the floor.
I feel bad now.
Turn on your microphone.
I feel bad, 'cause I think Councillor Jeunesse should have had a shot at this one. So I think I'll limit my comments to just saying I really do appreciate the work that was done by the SPA. I think that the bench as an actual physical feature that will allow people to sit and enjoy that area as a continuation of the work that's already existing in that particular area that hopefully will actually spruce it up, because there's some nice stuff happening there, but it hasn't been addressed in a while, and I think this will really help to nip and tuck that particular area and make it more useful to the community in general. So I think it's a great concept. I think it's a good use of that space. I think it's a great place to put this, and I truly appreciate the work that was done.
Okay, thank you. And the seconder was Councillor Bateman. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll echo those comments, and also note that the late Elgin Ambrose did a fair bit of work in that area with the two round images related to the first Spanish and the First Nations as well in that area. So it's a perfect spot for this. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a lot of problems with this design. I do appreciate the SPA committee putting these hours in, and I understand that they have a little bit of a talking about the artistic value of it. I go back to when Councillor Brenda Parkinson was here, and was her vision and dream was some thought-provoking art and a sculptor, something that you could go down there that's not a run-of-the-mill I don't know, I'm a little disappointed. It's a bench, and it's something similar to Ed McGregor. I would like to see something more some art, something that is thought-provoking. It certainly does solve the problem of putting plaques on it, but it's a bench. And it's a nice-looking bench, I don't disagree there. And some of the other artistic things that are in that corner, and I think that's a perfect place for it. But I'm really disappointed that there's not more of a, when I think of art, I like somebody there that will interpret it many, many different ways, and even some controversy. You see it in other communities. They have some art downtown, and some people hate it, some people love it. Everybody has a different opinion of what it really means. This is a bench. So I'm really, and I don't want to get onto the SPA committee because they have a tough decision, what to put in there, but I thought it'd be something more artistic, and I just really can't support a bench, and that's a lovely bench, but nothing in this design that really lights me on fire, so it's just my comment. Thank you.
I suppose the last design would have met those.
Quite frankly, I did like the last. I like the big rocks, but anyways, that's art's in the eye of the beholder. I certainly don't like this.
Okay, other comments? Councillor Logans and La Jeunesse?
Yeah, I do like it, but I can completely understand where Councillor Beddoes is coming from. When I was with Councillor Parkinson when she saw the piece of art in Halifax that inspired this idea to come forward, and it was a tower with a hole in it, and through the hole you could see the harbor, and so it kind of inspired a new way of looking at the harbor, and that's why I asked about whether or not that might be included. I was satisfied by the response that you provided regarding using the benches as a way to look out to the harbor, but perhaps Councillor Beddoes has a point that we need that more creative way of looking at the harbor rather than just a place to sit. So I wouldn't nix this completely. I think it's fantastic. I would love to see it there, but it would be really wonderful if we could have that little artistic piece where we can have that, looking glass view of the harbor that has people walk up to it, interact with it, and see the harbor in a new way.
Councillor La Jeunesse, and then I'll go to others for first time.
Yeah, just to Councillor Beddoes' comments that he thinks that art should inspire some controversy. I think this already has done that. But the other reason, I guess, for this location was that it was a more secluded area. So if you want to go and remember your loved ones, it was a nice place to do that out of the main traffic area. And this concept that's here is just that. It's a concept, and it's going to be left open to the final artist, whoever is going to be designing it, to come up with the final design. So this, again, is more of a placeholder, I think, for what's to be there, but just to kind of give the mason or whoever ends up doing it an idea.
Okay. Councillor McMath, any comments? Okay. Councillor St. Pierre? For a second time?
For a second time, just very quickly, I do recall that one of the challenges we had when we discussed this in previous sessions was actually that we were trying to meet a lot of different needs with one single project. So we were trying to consider, the aesthetics, and is this an art piece? We were trying to consider replacement of benches that had deteriorated along width and spit, and where are people going to sit down where it's not going to, fall apart in the storms. We were trying to consider where can we put memorial plaques in a reasonable sort of spot. I would suggest that, as I've mentioned before, I do like this. I do agree with Councillor Beddoes that we could use some more art. I would suggest that we do our very best to make sure that the SPA funds are not exhausted on this particular project so we can get more art, but that the artistic component should be included as much as possible in the prettiest, most artistic bench we can get that will actually have plaques and last in the weather, and that we can also have art. But it's extraordinarily difficult to actually get the unicorn and have it do all those things at the same time. So again, appreciate the work.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Beto, second time?
Just a point of clarification, Your Worship, is so if this design goes forward, it will come back to council, a final design for us to approve. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
Just want to make sure.
Okay, because we need to know. Councillor McMath?
I tried. So just for the SPA committee and everybody else's sake, can we just give them more clarity and direction? Because you keep asking for art, but you're giving literally like abstract. So is it that we're looking for that piece that Councillor Logan's mentioned? And so then you have clear direction to take back to the SPA? So whomever takes over this project understands what the ask is? Because if we just say we want more art, what does that mean? So do we need to make a motion to that effect?
Yeah, and we're getting there. We have an motion, but it will need to be amended. So I'll make some comments. Just on the motion, one amendment is that I think we should strike out Whiff and Spit and replace it with Manuel Quimper Park. First off, in both of those, because they're two different areas. So just for clarity, where is it going? It should be Manuel Quimper. And then also in the top line, direct the memorial, in the first sentence, memorial design concept at Manuel Quimper Park instead of Whiff and Spit, because that solidifies the location. So I'd like to propose that as an amendment, if I could have a seconder, seconded by Councillor Logan. So just for clarity, this is just confirming where we're doing this. So I'll call the question on the amendment. All in favor, please? Okay, thank you, that's unanimous. So that was just the first part that I thought of. The second one is I agree with Councillor St. Pierre. It's trying to do everything at once. And so that's where it creates a bit of, like for me, I was happy with a square box. I know that's boring, but I feel that our residents need a place to put and memorials to loved ones, and they just need a place to do that. It was just a long, boring bench, and now we've run out of room for that. So when the squares came forward, I guess it fits me, it seemed perfect. However, I also know that these are important places to our community, so if we're going to put something in place, let's make it as beautiful and as we can, absolutely. I do think this bench is double-sided, right? So, because if you're sitting on it, then you can sit facing inwards and looking at the shields, but you could also sit on the other side and look outwards. Okay, that's important that and the bench is the back bench is in the middle with seating on either side. Okay. And then I think with this, because there's some elements of it that are incomplete, like with the sides, is it a lighthouse, is it this? I think the piece that Councillor Logan's referenced is important to include, that maybe it isn't a lighthouse, but that the artist creates something with a look-through area. And what we learned is that that particular stone that is out in Halifax is not available here. So having the stone that we can actually, from what we heard, break into without it falling apart was a challenge. So then that's what led to these sort of formed blocks that we got at a previous meeting. So those were some of the issues there. So I think this is where it is that direction piece back to SPA, like you're on the right track here, however, we're missing the original intent, and that's what we need to see here as best as we can. And that's where you need someone with artistic ability to say, okay, I hear what you're saying, here's how we can incorporate this into this bench. And I like that it's a big bench that fits a lot of plaques on both sides, because I think we're going to run out of room, and then we're going to need to look at what is the next piece for this. I originally wasn't that great on the location, and I thought, could we not just find, when you walk out onto the spit, kind of that first length, and then kind of to the right, there's kind of a grassy area. Like, what about just like a plinth? But it is subject to the weather, and big logs coming in and storms and the like, it could get easily damaged. So yeah, I totally get why this is a better location for durability, and there is an opportunity to clean up this area, which is also needed. So, but that's where we're tying in a lot of things. We're tying in the cleanup, the land, removing of invasives, and there's a lot of work here. So I don't think all of that belongs in the spa reserve to fund. There's just other components that need to be done. And then also just finding a way to incorporate those elements. So I think that's, if we could just add a piece that, this will go back to, what is the process then? Will this go back to the spa committee for like a final kick before it goes out, or do we just send it out now? Does this go from council out to a bid process?
Through your worship, the council, staff would have to put it out through a bid proposal to get either artists that are interested in this to propose on a new rendition using this as a base to incorporate the other features that council wanted considered. Those would get submitted to staff. They would most likely have to go back to the SPA committee. If they were happy with that, it would go to council for final approval before the project was implemented.
Okay, so we can still add then that motion, so we can look at adding in an amendment then, and that council direct staff to include the intent of the original design in the bid? Help me out here. Yes? Is it needed? I don't know. Go ahead.
Not really an amendment, but an additional motion.
But it's all tied into this.
We would, I feel like we could still vote on the others and move forward.
Okay, well, we can vote on the others. I'll take that then, that we'll vote on the other part, and then we can look at a motion arising. But then that's where, and then we'll discuss whether or not to include that or not. Otherwise, it'll just, if the first part of, I have no problem calling the question on this, and then we'll do a follow-up. But if this passes and the other piece doesn't, then this is what they're going with, okay? Good. Yes?
I'd just ask a question of staff. Maybe staff could get us a picture of that sculpture in Halifax. It must be readily available.
It's in the staff, it's in, yeah, I mean, it was in the original staff report that first came to us.
Did you get it at the spot?
It was a rock with
With a hole in it? Okay.
It's tall stone.
Yeah, it's basically a big rock with a hole in it.
It's art.
It's like a painted, no, Councillor St. Pierre.
I was just curious as to, with this intent thing, if we actually go ahead with it, does the SPA committee have the latitude to go ahead with a utilitarian bench with plaques and another, basically a sculpture, similar to what Councillor Beddoes is suggesting?
No, this is one thing,
So it is a one thing as opposed to an installation?
Yeah, this is a memorial piece, not so much an artistic sculpture. They're two different things.
Okay.
If we wanted SPA to do a sculpture, that's a whole other discussion and a different report, just to have like an artistic sculpture,
That's a very good thing to know.
right? It would be two different pieces. Okay, so we'll deal with this first one then. So this would be based on this report only and what's in front of us.
Needs some clarification, Your Worship.
Okay, so that is a point of personal privilege that you could make.
Sure.
What is your point?
I guess I'm a little, the original concept was a piece of art and not a memorial bench. The memorial bench and putting the plaques on was a second thought after the art. is my
No,
understanding.
no.
That's not your understanding?
No, it was always, it started as a memorial wall. So back
Okay.
in the day, the benches, we ran out of room for benches.
Yeah, I understand the.
So then the committee at the time, or council at the time, I can't remember, said, let's put in a memorial wall where everyone could put their plaques, and that became policy. So we said, okay, no more added benches at Whiff and Spit. We're going to put them all on the wall. And then the community said, okay, well, where's the wall? And then it was the case, we needed to find the location for the wall, and where does it go? So then it was the case where, in conversation with Councillor Parkinson, she was like, a wall, it's so boring. Like, why not make it more, if we're going to drop money, it should be something prettier. For those of you that know Brenda, of course, it's not just going to be a
That's
wall.
sort of where I was getting at.
Yeah.
There had to be that artistic quality.
So it was never like, let's put a sculpture at the Spit
And then, okay.
and add plaques to it. It was, we need a place to put plaques, as close to the Spit as possible. And then that's what led to the art coming afterwards. So what we have here is kind of a hybrid. And then we got one, but we didn't like it, so we nixed it, and we sent it back to the committee, and now here we are again. And again, the intent is, we need a place to put plaques. And I'm at a point where a square will do. Can we just put it there and put some, because there's a long lineup for them. But that's okay, that's my inside voice. So, what we are voting on is this report specifically, the concept. If this passes just on its own, this report and staff will send it out to bid and say, we're looking for something like this, and then that'll come back to us, and then we take it from there. Because that's the direction at this point in time, and my amendment was deemed out of order, so I stopped amending it, and we left it solely. You'd call the point, I ruled, we're here. So I'm going to call the question. We all know what we're doing. We're moving ahead, all right? All those in favor, please? And that's unanimous. Now I will test a motion arising. I don't even know why I'm doing this, but actually, I'm fine with it. So if any of you feel that the original element of something to look through should be direction further to, now is the point for you to raise that, otherwise, let it go. Councillor Logans.
Yes, I agree. I think that is part of the original intent of the artistic side of it.
Okay,
So
you need to make a motion.
my motion is to add, what did you say, looking through? A piece of,
A hole in the
a
wall.
hole, some sort of,
Artistic hole in
I love that you threw this at me. Yeah, a hole. Got that, Ms. Temple? Be incorporated in the art. You can friendly amend the heck out of that all you want.
Look through, that's correct.
Yes, thank you. A feature, yeah.
I will second that motion.
So perhaps, and who do you wish to direct this to? To staff? That
Be
council directs?
incorporated into the bid that goes out to
So council directs staff
direct staff.
that a look-through be incorporated into the memorial
Memorial design.
design. What is it? It's a memorial. We don't. A view, a look-through. Okay, so
An interactive look. No.
let's not, that's too much. So that council directs staff to incorporate a look-through into the memorial design concept. So that's been moved by Councillor Logans and seconded by Councillor Beddoes. Okay, to motivate.
It's been said, thank you. Please support.
Okay, Councillor Beddoes.
Yeah, I think that would certainly solve, if we do something a little bit better than the bench with some sort of art with a look-through or porthole, or somewhere a kid can be on one side of it. If you were here for the rock one, it was even more fun. But I'm okay with that. I support it with that little artistic addition.
Okay, anyone else on the motion?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just want to point out that the current design is only calling for 125 plaques. Now, that is going to fill up rather rapidly. Perhaps we need to ask for double that to ensure that this is a memorial wall that will have some longevity.
Okay, so
That's a friend.
an option is that, I hear what you're saying, and I tend to agree, is the look-through components might have an ability of adding more spots.
Okay.
Because in this diagram here, it was mentioned that even the side pieces, if they were lighthouses, could incorporate plaques on the tops of those that would allow more space. So maybe these side pieces are something else that are taller? I don't know. I'm not an artist. You don't want me to design anything. Councillor Logans.
The wording, and I feel like the intent of this motion we're working on now, to clarify, is to use specific language to get a more specific design when we go out to tender. So what I believe we could add is, of course, there'll be information for the artist regarding the approximate 125 plaques, and with a preference of more if possible. So hopefully not less. But that does provide guidance to the intent of providing as much space as possible for plaques, if that makes sense.
Does that make sense, Mr. Carter?
Yes.
You can work with it. Councillor St. Pierre.
Just in terms of addressing the possible expansion of the bench, we could have some language in the, I guess it's going to be an RFP, basically requesting that be considered in the design. So for example, don't use the entire site or consider future expansion in your design. We don't have the money not necessarily right now or the need right now, but if we actually consider future expansion and if the design takes that into account, it'll be easier to do at that later stage.
So perhaps a friendly amendment then is to then after, instead of concept period, put a comma, and that's expansion,
Friendly.
and that room for expansion be incorporated? Do we want to add that to this?
The design consider expansion or something along those lines, but that's just,
You know, it may also be the case where we need to look at a different area for our residents as well.
yep, totally.
You know, it may be the case of just looking at other areas rather than one fitting all. This area isn't, you know, it depends.
This would just be a way to consider what Councilor Bacon was suggesting.
Mr. Carter, do you have a way of contemplating that, or do you need another amendment?
Through your worship to council, no, it looks good, just with design consideration for future expansion.
Sorry, I'm missing, okay, so with design, okay, this is the friendly amendment, with design consideration for future expansion. Okay, I didn't see it there, so I'm like, what am I not reading that is up there? So that is an amendment. So I'm going to call for a vote on the amendment, please. Is someone prepared to move that? Moved by Councillor McMath, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. We're adding with design consideration for future expansion. Good? Okay, all those in favor of the amendment? That's unanimous. Now on the main amended motion, and that is that council directs staff to incorporate a look-through into the memorial design concept with design consideration for future expansion. Any other comments? Seeing none, all in favor, please? And that's unanimous. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to the public for bearing with us. This has been, it's been a long road, but
We're not there.
we're getting somewhere, but it's important, I think, that our residents have a place to remember their loved ones, and it's just making sure we get it as right as we can. Brenda's proud. Okay, that's good. She's be like, about time. I can hear it now. Okay. So our next item is 10.3, which we've added to, there's a shift here. Okay, no, that was 11.2. Okay, so the next one is 10.3, the SUC Program of the Arts Committee recommendation for festival event infrastructure. And so we have our staff report here, and we had a good question from Mr. Wallace earlier tonight, just in regards to like how this is coming about. So we'll get that because I'm a bit unclear of it as well. So I'll ask staff to take us through the report, please.
Thank you, Worship. Through your Worship to Council, staff have reviewed this report, and with the timing of the AEP process as well as other developments going on around John Phillips Park, staff's recommendation would be for council to consider receiving this for information at this time to see what the developments around the park, what the concepts are realized and approved as part of sort of the Lions development as well as the one next to the Municipal Hall, and at a time where public consultation would be engaged following that for any additional elements in the park would be the time to revisit this. Alternate recommendation is will be provided for council's consideration. They received the report for information from the SPA committee regarding the festival event infrastructure and consider it in the future for after additional public engagement regarding John Phillips Memorial Park has been conducted.
Okay, because that makes sense. And then just for the members of the public, in terms of timing, because the item regarding the Lions and John Phillips was dealt with in camera, the Rise and Report happened, but the SPA committee was not at that meeting. So they have their own, they create their own agenda, and we're discussing other needed items. So that was happening, and because this was in camera, they weren't aware of it, would be how I would perceive that. So even when I saw this, I'm like, what are they, why would we do two things? I don't understand where this is coming from. But it was likely the SPA committee, who is involved with our events, felt there was a need for, but I'll ask Councillor Lajeunesse. I'm just assuming, reading through these minutes on the outside. So Councillor Lajeunesse, please.
Yeah, as Her Worship has pointed out, that this was strictly coincidental, that the SPA committee had been discussing for a long time creating infrastructure to hold festivals and events, and it just so happened that this item came onto the SPA agenda at the same time that the AAP was announced. The SPA committee was not aware that any discussions had been happening with the Lions at that point.
Okay, so that makes sense just to, for this then, and then all process-wise, as the committees come together and discuss items, then they need to make all the recommendations through to council. So that's where it just flows up, and then council either moves on them or sends them back to the committee or asks for more information or doesn't advance the idea. We've certainly had that before, where we're just not prepared to advance some of the recommendations. Councillor Logans?
On that note, I'll move receipt for information.
Okay, we have just a point
sorry.
of order
Yeah.
here. Ms. Temple?
Sorry, just one procedural thing. So this recommendation was actually moved and seconded at the July 26th meeting, and then postponed to today. So this is essentially a live resolution that should be dealt with before a secondary resolution is made.
Okay, so it's a live motion. So then we would need to, I guess, at this point, defeat it and put a different motion forward, or it's up to council to decide if they wish to proceed because it's live. Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Councillor Logans.
Yes, speaking to this motion then, I do appreciate what the SPA committee has brought forward, but I would rather see some, like if you're looking for infrastructure or even ideas, it would be great to see $30,000 allocated to gathering space in our Lot A development, since that's a now item on our strategic plan. Bringing such a thing to John Phillips doesn't quite fit with what we're doing at the moment. While there is a lot of action going on in and around the park in terms of developments there, maybe hold off the SPA committee until we see what's going on with the Lions Club, as well as seeing what's being developed in Lot A.
Okay, Councillor St. Pierre.
I actually have a further question for staff with regards to this entire motion. And I think I know the answer, but I want to confirm. So if we actually went ahead with such a motion, which looks like not to be the case, and that's fine, where would the money for such a building be coming from exactly? Will we be looking at grant funding from the province or the feds? Where would this who would be building the building, and who would be paying for the building?
Through your worship to Councillor St. Pierre, it would have to be something, and Ms. Gray can add to this and chime in if she likes, but it'd have to be weighed against other priorities on annual budget consideration.
Yes, I would assume if this is something council would support, then they would direct staff to include it in the 2022 budget, and then options for funding it would be presented to council. As far as for the final construction of a building like this, I assume would be quite expensive, so options would be provided. I would presume it would be considered an art. It wouldn't be considered art, I would doubt, so I wouldn't think that the spa funding would be available. And as such, there's currently $99,000 in the spa reserve fund, with $15,000 being used now for the design of the memorial wall, and approximately $12,000 a year gets added to that spa reserve fund, with 3% of building permit revenue being added to that fund every year. So there wouldn't be right now there currently wouldn't be an identified funding source, and if this is something council would support, staff would have to find a funding source for this, which could be taxes, could potentially be one of our reserve funds, but we'd have to look into specifics.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, through you to staff, I'm curious of when we will be receiving the staff report on further public consultation on the AAP.
Yet to be determined. As I mentioned in my CAO update, I'll be meeting with the representatives from the Lions Club Thursday this week. I have a clear idea of what council wishes to see before we schedule any public meetings. That's the information that we're going to go over later this week when I meet with representatives from the Lions Club. That will take some funding, and as I said, I don't see that the design elements for a public meeting being produced in the short term, so it'll be sometime in 2022.
2022, okay. All right.
Okay, so we're back to this postponed motion, and we need to vote on it. So, again, it is that council allocates $30,000 in the 2022 budget to secure a consulting design firm to determine the best location for festival event infrastructure in John Phillips Memorial Park, and to develop a 50% design drawing with Class D cost estimates for the construction of the facility in 2023. Okay, so it's postponed. I'm not supporting it, and I recommend you don't either, but that's up to you, okay? For the reasons that we just discussed. All right, so I will call the question. All those in favor, please? I know you were so tempted. Any opposed? Okay, so unanimously opposed. We've defeated that motion. And the follow-up motion is then that council receive the report for information. Oh, here it is. That council receive the report from the SPA committee regarding festival event infrastructure for information and future consideration after additional public engagement regarding John Phillips Memorial Park has been conducted. Okay, moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor McMath. Any comments? No? And yes, go ahead, Councillor McMath.
In the interim, it would be nice if the SPA could look at some of the pieces of infrastructure we already have. So we have at Ed McGregor Park, we have a space, and then also working with the Suit Community Association, because the Flats has hosted quite a few music events there as well. And we used to have, was it the Jazz Festival there?
They canceled that.
Yeah, so we could maybe uncancel something, yeah. Just in the interim, just the price tag with that, it's not the time, but not to stop the idea.
Okay, any other comments? Now's the time if you want to speak on the motion. Go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
Well, I just want to clarify that the SPA committee was responding to a motion that I had made back in the spring seeking to get our parks with more events happening in them, and we were looking to create some sort of marketable event program for 2022. So that was a process that began there, and there's some really talented people on that committee who've come up with some bigger ideas, and that's what we're dealing with here. And so just to clarify that.
Answer my question about the design specifications. Is there one?
Mr. Wallace had a question, and I didn't fully write it down.
The three-sided structure.
The three-sided structure. That's what
That's defeated. It's a point.
that's the part that we just defeated doing.
You asked for $30,000 for design.
We're not advancing that work. Yeah.
Is there a design specification?
Excuse me.
No, the whole thing has been defeated. Mr. McInnes.
To that question, Your Worship, under staff comments in the report, under resolution number 1, it goes through that we'd have to go through a request for proposal. The specifications for the request for proposal are not done yet.
Okay. So on this particular item, in response to Councillor Bateman, this likely came up because at one time we had a community, back in another time, we had a community picnic in the park that also ended with a movie in the park. And it was that both were well-attended and well-received. And there was a desire to have more events and such occur in the park. So that's what kind of, you know, if you sort of follow the progress to where we're at now is to where we are. We've lost events like the Reggae Festival, the Bluegrass Festival, and even Canada Day is supposed to be challenging being held at Souk Flats because the Souk Campground, the Community Association has a focus on camping, which is great. Well-needed, good recreation in this particular area. So it's been the case of where can we host things, and while the volunteers do this, there's a lot of legwork because we don't have a lot of infrastructure in the park to run these events. We found ways to do them, but there certainly has been a demand for more. We had the Starlight Cinema at Ed McGregor. The wind would often cancel the event there because the blowing against the screen. And it was great when we had those events, particularly for young people where there's things lacking. So finding a bit of a warmer location and a location that is a bit buffered from that, which is what led to the movie that we had here in the park. It was everything was great except for the visual, which was a technical glitch with the production company, nothing to do with the elements itself. The screen was great, the sound was great, location was great, concession was good, all of that. And it was a case of more of this. And then, of course, everything kind of got shut. But we do run into accessibility issues in John Phillips Memorial. The park is great for some, it's not accessible to everybody, which is what has sort of led us to where we're at now with infrastructure and an organization bringing it forward. I don't want to go on to that because it's not really what's in front of us, and Councillor Beddoes would have to step out. So here, it's just basically really receiving this report, and I'm sorry I didn't get your question answered, but glad that our staff did. Okay, so I'll call the question on this recommendation. All in favor, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, the next up is 10.4. I'm just getting used to these glasses. Sorry, okay. So resignation of Climate Action Committee member. So this here then is that council received the report pertaining to the resignation of a Climate Action Committee member for information. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Bateman. Any discussion?
So I'll just point out that this is Beatrice Gentili Helios, who's resigned from the committee. I've been told she's been struggling to devote time to the group while balancing other demands. Now, Beatrice is a member of Climate Justice Victoria, and she'd begun to partner with our Alicia Tyson-Jones on a climate justice working group to develop recommendations for the Climate Action Plan framework. So she'll be missed, but we really appreciate her efforts and contributions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman. Okay, all those in favor of receipt? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, next up is item 10.5, the Climate Action Committee recommendations for the 2022 budget. So I'll turn this over to staff, and then I'll go to Councillor Bateman just to take us through a bit more. Go ahead, Councillor, or pardon me, Mr. McInnes.
Thank you, Your Worship. So what's in front of council in this report is the direction that was received by myself to have the 7% solution costed out and included in the budget. That 7% solution was costed out, but it had a very broad range of possibilities. So on September 28th, we brought it back to the Climate Action Committee to try and narrow in on exactly what they'd like to see in the budget for the 7% solution. What you see in front of you today in this report, the $101,000 broken down into the various components, is that piece. The Climate Action Committee is working on two other big pieces, as you know, the storytelling and the Climate Action Plan, which includes adaptation and mitigation factors. The only thing that we've got direction on costing out at this point is just the 7% solution, and that's what this report is dealing with. So that's what's in the draft budget that Council will see on Monday, on the 18th of October. The other two components may come sometime in the future, but perhaps Councillor Bateman can speak to those two pieces.
Thank you, Mr. McInnes. Councillor Bateman?
Yeah, thank you, CAO McInnes. So yes, we're looking for council tonight to okay this budget in principle for now. It will be discussed and become a piece in play as we work further on the budget. And we know how these budget processes go, but this was the committee's recommendation as of our meeting in late September, and fair warning that a CAC budget working group is developing a modification on this proposal, which will be presented to you potentially if it's passed by the CAC tomorrow night. But what's in front of us here follows pretty precisely the report that's in the agenda presented to the CAC by Sue Wilkie. And, you know, these budget asks are rooted entirely in Council's approval, as CAO McInnes was saying, in the 7% solution and its related citizen engagement strategy. We as a council approved the 7% solution strategy back on July 26th. And we directed staff with CAC support to review, to create an implementation plan, prepare budget recommendations for incorporation in the next 5-year financial plan, and investigate funding sources and partnerships required to implement the strategy fully. So, so there we go. So this, you know, I don't think I need to go any further. Its 7% solution focuses very strongly, as do many GHG reduction plans, on the two main sources, existing building heat and helping commuters make the modal shift away from internal combustion engines. And there's very specific targets in Anna Russell's 7% strategy. And so in these points that you see in front of you, we have funding for the district share of an intern climate action coordinator. Now, Sue Wilkie has found funding for us through the Career Launcher Program. That's $25,000, so we need to top that up with another $20,000. That gets us 9 months of direct climate action work from a ideally very talented and bright graduate in one of the STEM programs. And that individual will work with Norm and our new CEDC officer and communications coordinator, Christina Moog. And it's our hope a renewed climate action committee, if indeed we manage to get a life extension into 2022. So that's number one. Number two is a top-up rebate program for heat pumps. A number of municipalities, Colwood, Esquimalt, Central Saanich, et cetera, have $350, limited number of $350 rebates. This was a recommendation that also came up last year in our budget through Councillor St. Pierre and the Climate Action Committee at the time. And we've identified $21,000 for 60 households. And to carry on, we have the $20,000 for the education engagement campaign. Via what we're calling the 7% Toolkit. This is a very Souk-specific program that will allow locals to check in and get information that they need, sort of a one-stop website with updated info on rebates, best practices, local business directory of related trades, energy coach services. Ideally, we'll have the PACE program, which potentially will be in this month's Clean BC Roadmap to 2030 update. And carrying on, as I do, we've got transportation mode shift. This is a placeholder piece that will give us time to develop a strategy around mode shift, and it's been suggested supporting a telework space within the town center might be one way to begin that work. We also have $5,000 for grant possibilities Mr. McInnes works with really, what have we got? $10 million in grant funding over the last 18 months. And this will give the district an opportunity to pursue some of the many grants out there, the Green Municipal Fund, for example, and numerous others. Anna Russell has created a chart which she's supplied to the district. And $5,000 for participation in CRD programs like its energy coaching program and others that we have to buy in on to participate. And finally, a municipal fleet assessment of $10,000, and this is a part of the draft OCP states that we need to lead by demonstrating. And so the municipal fleet, by buying into this program through, who is it through? Anyway, it provides up to $10,000, a whole suite of possible rebates and cost savings for the district as we purchase and install fast chargers, level 2 charging stations, and analyze the municipal fleet. So that's where things stand, and we're looking for, I'll field some questions if anyone has them.
Okay, let's start there, and then we'll field questions, and then I'll go to you to make a motion. Okay? Councillor McMath.
Are these organized in the Climate Action Committee's priority?
Well, the Climate Action Committee's primary priority is the 7% solution, which is designed to get us to
I understand that.
You understand that,
Is
okay.
this, though, is this the order in which, if we couldn't capture all of these pieces, because it's quite a large ask. I'm glad there's measurables, but it's quite a large ask. So as things may get nixed as we go through the budget process.
Oh, I see.
Do you guys have you triaged, or do you have a priority, or?
No, we haven't prioritized.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor St. Pierre?
Yeah, I have a number of small questions, I guess. I noticed in the report, which I found really good, there's a huge amount of information there, that wayfinding was actually recommended as one of the best ways of actually helping our community in terms of, reducing emissions and so on and so forth, and that the energy audits were actually considered the best way to get people to use heat pumps. The energy audits were actually mostly paid for through federal and provincial programs, so that wouldn't come out of our pocketbook, but that wayfinding could actually direct people to those energy audits. I was curious as to whether or not it might not be more effective to use the $20,000 for heat pump rebates towards actually just familiarizing the community with the energy audits and making sure the wayfinding was happening for as many people as possible, given that the energy audits do seem to actually get people out of the heat pumps. And if we might not be able to actually capture a larger number of households and honestly point more people in the right direction by putting our resources in that direction. I'm curious as to whether or not I know that the committee's amazing and has done a lot of number crunching. Is the 60 households representative of actually meeting our targets on a 7% reduction of carbon on households through heat pumps, or is it, how was that number actually arrived at, would be, I guess, another question. And I've got a few more, but if you want to start with those two, that'd be.
Yeah, sure. So, wayfinding, absolutely. The 7% Toolkit is designed to be a website portal, view hole, that you can go to and get all that kind of information you need. And in fact, there are these energy, not view hole, what do we have? Energy coach services. Yeah, absolutely. So that is absolutely critical, is that we drive people to a one-stop where they can see an updated list of all the rebates, including, BC Hydro's new $3,000 heat pump rebate, which was just announced last week. And there are now upwards of nearly $11,000. So your point around that 21,000, the 60 households, we were given, Sue Welke gave us some options here, and she gave us a range of options based on other communities, from $350 to $6,000 per household. So we on the committee were wise enough to know 350 is the standard rate that's being offered by other municipalities of our size. And so we went with that in the moment. I'm very curious to see what the committee comes up with as their alternate budget recommendations as of tomorrow. But yeah, the 60 households under the heat pump program, in Ms. Russell's calculations, we need to target, what is it, 244. That's about right, eh? Yeah, 244 households with heat pumps. But the key with that wayfinding and the advantage, as you perhaps recall from last year, is that by getting district residents to sign up, we can now monitor and track them and see and use them as case studies and we get the numbers and measurements.
Okay.
Yeah, those are two of the questions.
I'll follow up a little bit. So this is a bit more in terms of a comment, but having worked with
Questions only.
questions only, I'll follow up later with that. The actual modal shift piece of it, there's a program called Scrap It, which many people are probably aware of. I think that we could consider a top-up on Scrap It. We could be looking at a lot of the things that are being considered on the heat pumps, bulk purchases, so on and so forth, wayfinding, in order to help people transfer over to that sort of thing. And improving cycling infrastructure, of course, would always be a part of that. But I was wondering if the committee was actually considering specifically e-bikes as part of the modal shift, not necessarily as a primary vehicle for everyone, but I think a campaign, My Other Car is an E-Bike, and bumper stickers to go with it might actually help out. If two-car households or three-car households could limit themselves to 2 cars or 1 car through the use of an e-bike, that could really reduce our emissions. So I'm curious as to whether or not that's being considered by the committee.
Absolutely, it's considered. So in Anna's 7% strategy, in helping commuters who drive an internal combustion engine vehicle to make a modal shift to a low, no-emission alternative, such as working from home or from a local office, taking transit, or using an e-bike or electric vehicle. And it was really good to see in the draft OCP that one of the action items is, in fact, an e-bike rebate program.
Thank you.
And Scrap It, yeah, that's a good mention, and I'll raise that with our group.
Okay, you're good, Councillor St. Pierre? And turn off your microphone. Thank you. Other questions? Councillor Beddoes.
Actually, there's some things I actually like here, but I mean, it'll shock you. Yeah, I am. I need a little bit more flushing out of the $20,000 engagement campaign. Can you tell me what that looks like, please?
Yeah, and your microphone. Microphone off? Microphone on.
Yes. Well, Christina Moog has come up with a remarkably detailed plan, which I don't have in front of me. And I guess as our budget discussions continue, I will have that in front of me, and we'll be able to share with you her master plan.
Would that 20,000 be for her salary? Would that 20,000 be for literature? You don't have that information, obviously.
I'll ask, maybe staff can answer that, just what the intent of the 20,000 was.
Well, a lot of work is going on around the social mobilization and community engagement piece, the storytelling piece. And we don't have solid numbers on what to include in the 2022 budget at this point in time. That will be fleshed out. And one of the issues from a timing perspective that is going to be a little bit of a challenge for us this year is we still hope to have the 5-year financial plan bylaw adopted by council by the end of the year. We will have this space in the first quarter of 2022 before the tax rate bylaw is ultimately approved in May of 2022, where we may have to do some adjustments. But all of those adjustments may have an impact ultimately on taxation. So there's a little bit of the timing issue here. We don't want to miss this whole 2022 cycle, but a lot of work is being done right now to try and get some considerations into the budget. So some flexibility, I think, may be requested of council if they see fit, if you see fit.
Does that help? Okay.
Yeah, I just find it kind of confusing is we're voting to spend money, but we're not sure what we're voting it on. Or I know it's a budget consideration, but, and then we have another go at it. Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Just again, Your Worship, subsequent to the presentation by Ms. Russell of the 7% solution, there was direction given to cost out the 7% solution. We did our very best to try and cost that out, and that's what's in front of council this evening.
So in part, with the 20,000 here for the engagement campaign, it could be materials that are needed. I think the best engagement is actually getting out in the community, so any of the supplies necessary, website enhancements, any intern potentially work, that and the like, would that help? I think it's just Councillor Beddoes is just looking like, what am I spending 20,000 on? Is it Ms. Moog's salary? Is it what?
It is not salary. We have already considered and approved one extension to the consultancy that's doing that work. We may want to continue to build on the work that's going, but getting it out into the public really is that piece. What is it going to take to have enough oomph behind this project to change people's practices?
So it could be mail-outs, could be advertisements, all of those sorts of pieces. Okay.
But I'll definitely bring you a fuller accounting, a full accounting, as best we can. As CAO states, it's a fluid, evolving, placeholding kind of item for the budget.
Okay, so we have our recommendation here, and I'm seeing no other hands, so I'm going to move to the recommendation. That is that council includes costs of $101,000 for climate action work in the district's 2022 budget. The cost would go towards $20,000, climate action coordinator and intern position, $21,000, incentives to switch to heat pumps, $20,000 engagement campaign, $5,000 for the placeholder for grant contributions, $5,000 upcoming CRD initiatives, $20,000 for the mode shift, possibly to support telework space, $10,000 for fleet assessment. And I guess that engagement campaign, it fits with the climate action coordinator, the intern position, and any supplies and such needed, because putting it all on Ms. Moog is a lot. It's so much, like there's additional work that's going to be needed there. Okay, so that's the motion. Councillor Bateman's moving it. Councillor Logans is seconding it. Discussion on this. Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, I guess I'm really curious, you know, the Let's Talk Souk budget survey had a very specific question around how much people would be prepared to see of their, how much they'd like to see fund climate action in Souk. So we haven't heard the results of that yet, but I'm very curious to know, and that, I guess we'll be seeing those at Monday, okay, Committee of the Whole on Monday. Thank you.
Councillor Logans as a seconder.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bateman, for presenting that to us and for all of the work the Climate Action Committee has done on this. I've had ups and downs with this the whole time, but I think this is a very positive step forward. It looks to me like there are some steps that just need to fall into place, and this is the first one. And with the Climate Action Coordinator, these things will start to get worked out, and it's just a matter of continuing the discussion as we go through the budget process. What I like most about this plan is that it incorporates as much as possible other incentives and grants by different levels of government and corporations who can support this plan, and that to me gives a level of trust that this isn't just us throwing money out there. It's actually really well thought out, and it involves multiple players in many of these bullet points. So that is something I really appreciate about this, and I think that the community can stand behind as well. It will be interesting to see the results of all of this coming into action, because I think it will give us a really good platform for where we need to go in the future with our climate action work. This is a really long time coming, and I think that the community is going to be happy that we're starting to take active steps in the right direction. So thanks again, Councillor Bateman, and I hope we do support this and tweak it as we go.
Other speakers? Councillor St. Pierre, then La Jeunesse.
I'm going to reiterate a lot of what Councillor Logans has said. Amazing work, and thank you very much for the details. I understand that they can't be exact, but I do appreciate. I really appreciate the emphasis on engagement, because as we have realized, especially with the John Phillips Memorial and the direction of our entire district with regards to climate action, I don't think that the community necessarily understands what the district is doing towards climate action and what climate action looks like at a municipal level within our jurisdictional powers. So I'm really looking forward to seeing information out into the community, making sure that, for example, I would love to see a barometer, one of those thermometer type of things, with 244 homes with heat pumps, with a certain number of vehicles and so on and so forth. I'd like the community to know what 7% looks like, tangibly, practically, what the heck is happening here, and what is the district actually doing to support, getting to that point. Because I think that otherwise it's all black box, it's all hidden away. And what we're doing with our amazing staff that understand a lot of things that are needed, and all the information that we have, which is not necessarily shared with everyone in the community, is not necessarily shared with everyone in the community. And I think that they need to know. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing Ms. Moog's plan and what that's going to look like. In terms of specifically the heat pumps again, I'm interested in the Saanich model. This was my comment, where they're actually looking at a revolving fund. And I'd be interested to see whether or not we can work with BC Housing or other funders towards helping those people who have the least amount of money and therefore can't even take advantage of rebates. Those people also tend to be the people who have the most trouble dealing with, for example, computer forms and actually accessing the rebates. I believe that $350 would go much further towards someone hand-holding them through the process of filling out forms, going through those processes, and accessing the rebates. So I would suggest that that be taken under consideration when the money is being spent, if we actually choose to do this. I think that's where I'll stop for now. Thank you very much for your work.
Councillor La Jeunesse.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The 21,000, if you look at 350 per household for heat pumps, when they're between BC Hydro, the province, and the federal government, there's up to $11,000 in rebates already, and I think that if we're going to approve this 21,000, it would be much better spent on education. For example, if you take advantage of the $11,000 in grants, and it only costs you an extra $4,000 to put in a heat pump, how long is it going to take you to recover that $4K? So if we look at case studies on the benefits of actually switching to a heat pump, then we can incentivize people to work toward their own transformation, whatever. And I think that education is the key. That's where we can really make a difference in showing people how this can help them. And I think the heat dome that we experienced this summer is another excellent argument for heat pumps, where we don't have AC in this neck of the woods. And I think increasingly it's going to be something that we're going to want, especially in multifamily dwellings and more efficient buildings. We need cooling as well as heating.
Okay, other speakers? Councillor Beddoes?
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship. First of all, I do very much appreciate the Climate Action Committee and the work they've done on this. I think maybe some people think that I don't, but I do. I've asked all along that I want something concrete that actually makes an effect rather than hand-wringing and, things. So I see some things here which I very much can support. I also appreciate staff in the costing it out. It wasn't an easy matter. I see that they sort of go to the low end of some of these costs. I very much like the idea that we top up the coordinator if they were able to get a grant for $20,000, I believe, and see where that goes. If it's $20,000 well spent, we'll know it in 9 months' time. Don't have a problem with that at all. The incentives to switch to heat pumps, 60 households, $350. I'm okay with that. That's, I'm interested to see how that goes. And again, this is, we're all new to this. I don't think $350 is going to convert a whole lot of people to get their heat pumps in, and I don't know whether it helps the lower end if you've got 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 from other governments. But it's a token amount. It shows you that we are serious about climate change. So in that respect, I would support the 21,000 for that. The 20,000 for the engagement campaign, it's just, and it's not clear enough for me at this point in time. The others as well, I don't know, they might end up on the chopping block. But all in all, I appreciate the Climate Action Committee coming forward with some suggestions, which I can consider. And yeah, some of this is okay. So thank you very much.
Oh, damn. Councillor McMath, any comment? No, okay. So just finally for myself, I like the work that's come forward. It seems that it was a decade ago that SUC formed a green team. It was a notice of motion that I brought forward. It was following a workshop, and I remember sitting with a staff member, and we're like, who do we need to talk to about this? And we figured everyone, like everyone needs to do something. It hits every single department in our municipality. And then we sort of got excited that there was some work happening and didn't quite know what the journey was going to look like. And then, of course, the committee was ended, and then now it's reborn, and it's actually moving again, which is exciting to see. So it took a decade, a lot of focus and determination. So thank you, Councillor Bateman and Councillor St. Pierre, for reinvigorating this necessary work. What I like about it is that there's sort of something for everyone. So, and that I think is where we need to start, is finding the pieces, and that's the engagement piece for me, is I can't afford a heat pump, or I can't afford this, like what can you do? Well, here's some other things. And then that's sort of the engagement piece that I look forward to. I like that the Climate Action Coordinator, I think it's a position awarded to someone under 29. I think there's, it's targeting a more youthful individual, which I think will bring a whole new dynamic energy to this and will reach out in a different way. So that's where I think the engagement piece, the two need to kind of tie together to enable the individual to actually deliver and carry out a lot of work. And I'm curious to see what ideas, new ideas may come our way that we could move towards. For the CRD initiatives, just want to make sure it's not a service we're signing up for, so I'm fine, but I do know that we do need to pay to play in some regards. And so I think this is a great way for us to begin. And of course, there's always more we could do, but let's just start to get on with some things. And then the storytelling is important. So how many people did we reach, and what difference have been made, and how can we share those stories, because then others will also want to be a part of it. So I think it's great and fully in support of this, and thank you very much for the work that you're doing as well as that of the committees. Long time coming, but it's never too late to begin, right? Good. Okay, so that's been moved and seconded, so I'll call the question, please. All those in favor? And that's unanimous as well. Thank you. Okay, Santa Claus is coming to town. Maybe. He always does. Come on, let's not ruin Christmas just yet. Yes, Councillor Beddoes is recusing himself. He has a direct connection to Santa. But actually more with the Souk Lions Club, so he is recusing himself because of that particular connection. So, okay, so as we know, we did not have a parade last year, and I think we can this year, but we need to start planning. So again, it's the case here. It's proposed to be on Sunday, December 5th, and the route and time would be dealt with, and the theme and so forth. But this way, should council decide to advance this, it will give the Souk Lions, who does this work for us, a time to continue to begin that planning and to also track the public health orders to see what is doable when the date comes. Councillor St. Pierre.
I'd like to move the motion, but I'd like to suggest also that the $4,000 from the events be used, since we just may not end up using it before year.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So how about I say that council authorizes? Well, we need to read it out. So just hold your horses. That council authorizes the Souk Lions to organize and execute the 2021 Santa Parade with associated costs up to $5,000 and an honorarium of $5,000 from what? So $1,000 from the events budget, or pardon me, $4,000 from the events budget, and the remainder to come from council contingency. So we actually need $10,000 total. So $4,000 from the events budget, $6,000 from council contingency, and then we'll exhaust that account. So that is moved by Councillor St. Pierre and seconded by Councillor Logans. The next question is, we need to think about, and we always talk about it, but we don't do it, what are we going to do as a council? So we always have this vision of doing something, and in the end, we're holding a banner, handing out candy, and walking out of order, and dragging on the whole thing. But we turn on the Christmas light, was exciting, the trees and the lights. But if we actually want to contemplate a float or a decorated something, we should actually start thinking about that. And it's not really to bother staff, but we need to think about something, if at all. Happy to have you carry the banner, happy to hand out candy canes at a minimum, but we could also, we visioned of doing more than that, so we really need to start thinking about that. We got time, okay? Got time. Right. Okay. We're all good? Comments? Santa?
Could I just quickly ask through you to staff how much we have left in council contingency?
55,000.
Well, yeah, that's right. And I was curious about that because didn't we dedicate 40,000 to the dog park through council contingency?
Yeah,
So I'm wondering why it was
so
still
it came
so
down
high.
from 95,000.
Did it? Okay.
I think it started at over 100 and some thousand. We'll find out. That's great.
For the dog park, it was, it's unconfirmed yet if all the costs are going to be realized in 2021 or if some of those costs are going to be carried over to 2022, which is why the 55,000 is just saying it's just a educated guess right now what should be remaining in the fund, because our understanding is with some supplies with the dog park may be delayed, so it may not be actually completed and all bills received this year. So.
And we can't carry over unspent money. So, yeah, good. Okay? Questions? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Can we please have Councillor Beddoes return to the room? Okay, getting into our bylaw section, 11.1 is Development Cost Charge Bylaw number 775, 2021. And it looks like we have a speaker for this.
Perfect, thank you, Your
Mr.
Worship.
Heffernan.
Speaker tonight, we have Sean Heffernan with us with Urban Systems, been working with staff through the end of 2020 following the adoption of the Parks and Trail Master Plan as well as the TMP. We've been loading up critical projects in both those plans to develop the Development Cost Charge Program. Mr. Heffernan will give a brief presentation summarizing this report. Ultimately, we'll be looking for council consideration for first, second, and third reading of the Development Cost Charge Bylaw, as well as direction for staff to submit the program to the Ministry for review and endorsement. Just one note on this, typically, and Mr. Heffernan will highlight on it, these programs haven't been updated for a while in Souk. Typically, they are updated every 5 to 10 years. Things are moving so very quickly in Souk. And in alignment with us currently working on wastewater as well as stormwater master plans, staff will be bringing forward through 2022 and 2023 minor updates and major updates for council's consideration so that it falls in alignment to reflect accurate costs to the projects that we're going through critical designs with, as well as including possibly some of the elements of stormwater through the master plan for the projects that get realized, as well as some more of the parks projects within the PTMP. With that, I'll pass it off to Mr. Heffernan for a brief presentation.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me. Yeah, the presentation will probably take about 15 minutes, and there'll be some time for questions after. If there's any burning questions, feel free to jump in, but we'll have some time after as well. Oh, sorry. Oh, there we go, too many. Ruining the surprise. All right, yeah, so I think this is the third presentation that we've had together. So just a quick reiteration of kind of where we're coming from here. DCCs are currently charged only for sewer and transportation in the district of Sauk. The transportation DCCs were last updated in 2012, so that's going on 10 years ago. The wastewater DCCs were even longer, so 2004, so 17, 18 years ago. You're actually able to collect DCCs, and part of this update was to include stormwater as well as parks into the DCC program, and water is provided by the CRD. So DCCs in legislation you can collect for water, transportation, parks, sewer, drainage, and is it transportation? Yeah, so those 5 categories. So in there, the stormwater and the park are new charges that have been added into the DCC program, and we'll go through kind of the costs associated with that. The timing of the DCCs is following up on the completion of the Parks and Trails Master Plan, as well as the Transportation Master Plan in 2020. So the current DCC rates in Sauk are around 10,000, sorry, just under 11,000 for low-density single-family residential, medium-family residential, which would be duplexes, townhouses, triplexes, anything like that, would be around 7,700, and 5,700 for kind of a typical apartment unit. Commercial is currently charged $80 per square meter in Florida, and there's no current industrial and institutional charge within Sauk's DCC bylaw, but it is charged by the CRD through their Wandafuka Water DCC bylaw. So here we're seeing kind of the combined total, so Sauk's portion of that is less. So just to kind of reiterate where we're coming from again, the process to date has involved kind of looking at the amount of growth that's being anticipated over a 20-year horizon. That accounts for the total project costs, which are then subtracted from the benefit allocation. We've gone through this before, so the equation is essentially growth, the total costs of the DCC program divided by growth, and those costs are based on infrastructure master plans as well as other inputs from staff and technical background, the 5-year capital plan, et cetera. The project list is then broken into those projects that have full benefit for development, i.e. they're benefiting essentially development only, and then those projects that are cost shared, and that's the benefit allocation, which is item number 3. So I can talk a bit more about that, but I gave the example in a previous presentation of, you're replacing an existing 150 millimeter water main with a 200 millimeter water main, and that gives you, 50% extra capacity. That project would be split 50-50 between DCCs and the existing users through taxes and other things. So the replacement of that 150 is paid for by the existing user, and the expansion and capacity is paid for by DCCs, and that's to support new growth. The last part of there is the Cis Factor. So I've noted this before. It's different than the benefit allocation, and this is a tool provided in legislation that gives council discretion to provide an assist to development. And this can be anywhere from 1% to 99%. And in this, any reduction in the DCC by providing a larger assist is to be recouped through non-DCC revenues. So again, this would be general taxation or gas tax or another source. Through previous discussions, we've determined that a 1% assist was preferable at this time, and that's what's been included in the current program. So I've just kind of gone through all of this, but again, 20-year time horizon for growth. The program and project list is looking at that 20 years and, okay, what are the infrastructure components we need to support that future growth over the next 20 years? And again, this is kind of for master plans and the capital plan, and then looking at the benefit allocations kind of from a technical perspective for each of those, and then carrying forward the 1% municipal assist. So these are the components that are kind of outlined in detail in the report. That's part of the council package, so we can go through any points after the presentation in more detail if needed. Sorry. So again, just to reiterate the process, there's been a number of technical inputs. We've brought the present draft rates forward, there's been some minor adjustments, which I'll go through in the next slide here. We've undertaken stakeholder consultation, which I'll also go through some of the feedback that we received in that process. And tonight we're here for 3 readings of the DCC bylaw. Once the bylaw is given 3 readings, it will be submitted to the ministry for review and then approval by the inspector of municipalities, at which point it can be brought back for 4th and final reading. And I will note too that upon giving it 4th and final reading, there is 1-year in-stream protection for any active development applications that are currently ongoing. So anything that's been accepted will be given 1-year in-stream protection. So just a quick update since our last presentation in May. There's been a minor increase. It's been approximately $1,000. Most of this is due to new cost information around wastewater projects. So some of the projects have gone to tender. We've seen the costs are actually higher, so we've adjusted the costs to reflect that, as well as we've accounted for some grants that have been received in that time as well. So that makes up the majority of that kind of the change in rate that's occurred in that time period. Just to reiterate too, we did look at the ratios between kind of single family and non-single family residential uses, and there was an increase to the equivalent ratio to account for the fact that all single detached units will also be permitted where they're permitted secondary suites, so that it kind of accounts for that extra use of services and the higher impact on those services. And then confirmation of the 1% DCC municipal Cis Factor. So that brings us to the current rates. As of September 2021, we're looking at $16,327 for a single detached unit. That's a 108% increase from the previous bylaw. For medium density, again, this would be duplexes, townhouses, triplexes, et cetera. 72% increase to $8,882. For higher density multifamily or apartments, this will be a charge of $5,251, a 29% increase. And for commercial, the increase will be from $69 per square meter to $74.99, so $75 per square meter, and that will be an 8% increase. Again, industrial and institutional have not been charged to date, so those are new charges that will be imposed on those land uses upon adoption of the DCC bylaw. So just to kind of give you the grand total here, because from the developer's perspective, they'll also be paying the CRD, Juan de Fuca DCC water rates. So with all that included, we're looking at around $19,200 for single detached, $11,400 for medium density, $6,900 for apartments, and then $85.73 for commercial, $55.69 for industrial, and $98.19 for institutional. It's not meant to be a pick a number game, but we thought we'd provide some examples of how this stacks up to others in the region. So from the single family rate comparison, you can see that Sooke is second to Langford in the comparative communities we looked at. Not too far ahead of Nanaimo and Courtenay, but it kind of puts you near the higher end of that rate. We've had this discussion before in previous meetings. Typically, greenfield communities are more expensive to service, so the cost of infrastructure can often be higher in those communities than they would be in somewhere where you're doing a lot of infill work. So the apartment DCC rate, this is where Sooke is towards the lower end, so you can see third from the bottom here, just below Saanich, at $74. It kind of falls to kind of the lower middle range. And commercial, you're again kind of to maybe the upper middle range, but fairly close to Courtenay and below Nanaimo and Langford. So in between the last conversation we had in May and now, we've reached out to the development community and the public for some input and some feedback. So the DCC Best Practice Guides does recommend consulting with key stakeholders. So in this, we reached out to key stakeholder organizations, including the Urban Development Institute, Canadian Home Builders Association, the Victoria Real Estate Board, as well as directly to key developers working in the community. The districts, so that group was invited to a stakeholder session, which is held on June 9th. And as well, we also had information posted on the district's Let's Talk website for the general public as well as for other stakeholders. The stakeholder meeting was registered for by 18. I think we got about 10. There's some people coming and going throughout the meeting, but yeah, it was well attended, and there was a good discussion at that time. For this, the online Let's Talk input, we received 122 visits, 28 of those being engaged visitors, 36 informed, and 65 aware. Received 10 surveys, including 2 from developers. Of that, there was 10 for 10 strongly agreed with utilizing DCCs as an alternative to property taxes to pay for development costs. And 6 out of 9 strongly agreed with maintaining a 1% of Cis Factor. Only 2 disagreed, and there was 1 that was neutral. So within this, I mean, from the developed community, obviously not enthusiastic about having higher rates, but there were some really good points in that discussion too, that it's not necessarily about the cost, it's about how it's implemented and some of the elements that actually go into support that implementation, the long-term management of it. So some of the key points was that consistent management and acknowledging that in-stream protection, which I was referring to earlier. So again, that would be kind of taking note of the applications that are in stream and ensuring that they're given that 1-year in-stream protection and that's being tracked and maintained. DCC credits, so this is another kind of maintenance issue around developers who provide or front-end projects, so they build something that's on the DCC list, ensuring there's a policy in place or a system that would allow them to get credits back. So if they put in a pump station that's in the DCC project list for $1 million and they build $1.5 million worth of housing, then ideally they would have about $500,000 worth of DCCs after, kind of thing. So there's different ways to set that policy, and that's a discussion that we're having with staff, and that's a comment that we've taken in through this process. Again, stakeholders wish to see more regular DCC updates rather than kind of one large jump. I think this can be managed, and it is DCC best practice to do this every 3 to 5 years, a major update, and you can do minor updates every year. So I think that we heard from the development community it's preferable to kind of doing it less frequently and having these major shifts in costs, because it changes the way the performance and the inputs work on their end. And also noted that there was few transportation and wastewater DCC projects that have been constructed. I think we discussed this last time too, and I think there's, it reflects what is essentially probably an underfunded program, and that low DCCs have not allowed a lot of those projects to get built. So I think part of actually addressing this and completing the DCC program and constructing those projects is making sure there's sufficient revenue coming into those reserves to do that. So some conclusions. When compared to others in the regions, SUC ranges from the high side for single family to the low side for apartments. So mostly in that middle range. It's been a long time since the last update, so there's a pretty significant change, especially on the single family side, but it's been between 9 years for transportation, 16 for wastewater. DCC increases again should be done in a more timely manner, just to encourage more frequent, less large changes. And yeah, the increasing rate is between 8 and 108%. And when we looked at this, and as comment from last time too, this is, somewhat in that range of the change in housing costs and land. So, new house in 2004, 2012 is, a comparable change in that cost to today in terms of how DCCs have actually changed in that time as well. So just next steps. So again, tonight, looking at the final DCC rates and looking for council approval. If approval is given, the bylaw will be given 3 readings and submitted to the ministry for their review. It can take between 6 and 8 weeks to receive feedback from the ministry, at which point it can be brought back for 4th and final reading. We've also talked about the DCC reductions bylaw in previous conversations, and this would be a bylaw that would give council the ability to waive or reduce DCCs for specific developments that could be identified in legislation as for-profit affordable rental housing, not-for-profit affordable rental housing, small lot subdivision, and development design to result in low greenhouse gas emissions. So Legislation's very clear about what DCC reductions can be provided for. It's those 4 things, unfortunately. We've recommended in the past to do this as a separate bylaw, so it can be adjusted and adapted over time as needed, based on kind of the need and the demand, rather than tying it to the DCC bylaw and having to go through inspector approval every time you want to make a change to that. So this is something that that will be coming next, and something that's in progress now. Thank you very much. Is there any questions?
Okay, thank you very much for the thorough presentation. You always give us a lot of good information, so we thank you very much for that. I just have a couple of questions. One of them is the in-stream protection. Does that 1 year kick off when we adopt the bylaw?
That's correct.
Okay. And then the second one is where it goes off to the municipal, for inspection by the province. Which ministry would that be?
Be Municipal Affairs.
Municipal Affairs. Are you aware at all, or has there been, I'm just curious because there's always been the talk of local government holding up the supply or making it difficult to develop, and sometimes the provincial government has held that attitude when dealing with local government. I'm just curious now, with this going to inspection, would that potentially flare up? That when they look at reviewing it, what does that review look like? Do they look at it that you have a housing crisis and you're adding a 108% increase, or do they look more thoroughly? And
Yeah, and it's kind of, I guess there's a few elements to that. So the ministry review does include kind of like a technical justification review. Basically, do the projects meet the intent of legislation? Are they benefiting new growth? Parks have a very specific type of projects. They basically have to benefit all user groups. So there's kind of the technical review side. In legislation, it does have a statement that essentially says DCCs cannot impede development, and they must be essentially reasonable. So I think part of that is, looking at the comparative communities, we're falling well within that range. If we had something that was, like 200% higher, that might kind of trigger that, okay, yeah, the DCCs are kind of misaligned with others in the region. And then kind of to the next point is whether that's holding up housing and where these costs are actually like impeding the growth. I guess it's kind of a chicken and egg argument, because I guess you could argue that we need the infrastructure to support the development that would supply that housing, and DCCs are one of the fundamental tools that local governments have to actually provide those services. So in that sense, I think it can be argued that they're required actually in order to actually support that. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to provide those transportation, wastewater, and park projects that support that population growth.
And then, if they reject it for some reason, do we have the ability to appeal that decision?
Yeah, if they do reject it, and we've done some preliminary back and forth, but if it were rejected, it would come back to council, and we would have to make amendments, any recommendations that the province provided at that time, and we'd bring it back to you with those recommendations and those changes, and we can send the bylaw back.
Okay.
Once we've made them.
No, that's very helpful. And then just some of, with the stakeholder consultations, some early feedback that came my way is that, well, you may not be as high as Langford is, but they process applications much faster, and you can't charge the same as them because you're not processing the same as them. And I could get into the weeds in terms of pulling apart that argument, but on the surface, and I'm like, well, welcome to soup. It's nicer, the air's better up here.
Yeah.
And many other things.
No, and I think that's a common argument. I think it's, that's one of the points I mentioned too. I think it's balancing the implementation of DCCs with other things that, promote fairness and transparency in the process. And I think that's just important on the implementation side. And then the development application timelines are, they're varied. I mean, they can depend on a lot of different things, right?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm also glad that, with the parks, that covers off both. There was sort of the two elements, park acquisition and park development. So the DCCs that would come in would capture both of those?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, because I think that's, yeah. No, I think it's great. Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor St. Pierre, go ahead.
I have two questions, one for you and one for staff. My first question is for you, and given that there's an incentive to actually have regular updates on the DCCs, I was curious, and I'm sure there's a good technical reason for it, why not actually tie the DCCs directly to a cost of building, given, the projects that are in the pipe in terms of master plans and so on and so forth, so they're automatically updated to reflect the true costs? So that's just, I'm curious why that would not be possible or doable, or why it's not done.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor St. Pierre. Yeah, unfortunately, BC legislation doesn't allow the inclusion of that interest. So you can include a CPI index increase for a period of 4 years, but after that you can't increase it anymore, and that's typically done through the minor increase. Other provinces you can actually include in your bylaw like an average cost increase. Unfortunately, BC doesn't have that.
Or even just looking at the actual cost increase over the year and updating with that, but that can't be done.
So you can do that through a minor amendment. So basically, the difference between a minor and major amendment in the province's eyes is one is just changing costs, and I think this is what Director Carter was referring to, was that through the minor amendment, you can go through, and as you get new costs or you get new tender information, you can make changes only to the costs, but you can't add or remove any projects. That becomes a major update. So changing anything other than costs is a major amendment. You still have to, even with a minor amendment, have to go back to the ministry, but it's like an expedited kind of like quick check versus like a full review.
Okay, so just to confirm my understanding, we would be in a position with a minor amendment on a yearly basis to basically update the costs on the various projects that are in the pipe in order to make small adjustments to the DCCs to be more reflective of what the true costs would be.
That's correct. And you can include the CPI for your first 4 years.
Thank you. My next question is actually for staff. I'm curious as to whether or not the DCCs for parks will actually finally eliminate the cash in lieu that we have in our present system, which is insufficient to do anything useful.
Sorry, provide clarification, Councillor St. Pierre, for the cash in lieu for
So
what
this is
else?
the first time that we'll have DCCs for parks, and until now, when developers come forward with a proposal, we've been taking cash in lieu or a certain amount of land. Does this replace that, or is this something entirely different?
I believe it'll be in addition to that.
In addition.
Stay in place, and this will be independently on its own.
Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor St. Pierre, I can clarify that too. The DCC projects are meant to kind of tackle those like community and regional scale type projects that have a bigger impact, whereas the parkland cash in lieu, it's important those two things are separated, so there's no double dipping essentially, and kind of the policy framework and how we create the DCCs, one is kind of targeting those with more of a community-wide benefit, and the parkland, 5% parkland dedication should be more for the kind of neighborhood tot lots and other things that benefit specific developments.
Great. Other questions? Mr. Carter?
Yeah, through your worship to council, I just wanted to add a couple things to supplement Mr. Heffernan's report. With the DCC bylaw, these are very complex programs. For Souk, how fast we're growing, if you compare us to other municipalities on the island in general, a lot of them have been established for a long time. Souk's been incorporated recently. A lot of the stuff built here is to rural standards, and our development is a lot of sort of greenfield. It's very complex developments. Our rates based on our situation in Souk, in my opinion, should be very much so at the top of the DCC rates that are being charged on the South Island, and that has to be realized. And in terms of the minor updates, some of the major updates that we might have to look at for council's consideration would be incorporating different costs and projects into the DCCs based on the funding strategy. We don't have $25 million in DCCs right now. We're sitting in the few $1,000,000 range at most of our DCC accounts, meaning with the millions of dollars of projects we have on there, we're not going to be able to initially fund all of them through DCCs. We may have to look at consideration of small loans to fund portions of these larger projects. And when we do that, we want to capture some of the interest on there. So we may want to put the interest charges if we consider loans for some of these projects, and then payments through DCCs, just so we can capture all those costs. We've done our best to strategically put most of the key priority projects from the Parks and Trail Master Plan, as well as the Transportation Master Plan in there. but they are not all included in there. So as part of minor updates and major updates, we will be bringing forward for council's consideration increasing some of the parks projects in there, if that's what council's desire is. We've captured a lot of the transportation ones because they're critical, but we'll want to look at possibly including some of the storm projects as well as we work through the master plan and storm. So very complex, but great program. Definitely needs to be in place here.
No, that's very good rationale. Thank you, Mr. Carter. I mean, there was a time where we kind of prided ourselves on being the lowest, but then all that did was make everything expensive here, you know, and then if it wasn't for grants, we wouldn't be able to realize a lot of the work that we're doing. So we're relying on grants. And then for road work, receiving that blast rock from the province is saving us millions of dollars, but is making it possible to be able to do the necessary work. So if that didn't happen, like, we'd be, you know, maybe doing some widening on Church Road and filling a few potholes, but again, like, we'd have so much more congested streets. It would, I know that it's inconvenient right now with the traffic, but this work has been long overdue. And we need to position ourselves a bit better and, yeah. Go back to questions. Got distracted. Councillor Bateman.
Okay, yeah, so through you to our friend here, who's, thank you for these presentations. Sean.
Yes.
Right, okay. Mr. Heffernan. Mr. Urban Systems Heffernan. I eavesdropped on that developer stakeholder session back in June, and there were some interesting comments made. So one of our local developers stated, I've been developing in Souk for 15 years. We expected these DCCs to go up at some point, a bit of a shock for additional costs for development. And you responded noting that typically DCCs are between 1% and 3% of total home value. And at the time, average cost in Souk for new home was $700,000, I think. Mm-hmm. So could you explain that a little further?
Yeah, so I think this kind of goes back to that test, through the chair to Councillor Bateman. This goes back to that test of kind of reasonableness, right? And kind of making up a proportion. And there's no set number, you know, 2-3% is kind of like, you know, when I've done the math in the past, that's kind of typically where it lands. Sometimes it's less, sometimes it's more. So, you know, if you think now the average new house in Souk, probably a lot more than 700 even today from when we last had that presentation, you know, at 20,000, I'm trying to do the math in my head where that lands, but I do think it's kind of in that arena, maybe even less actually. I don't have a calculator on me, but yeah, I think it's kind of that what will deter development, and you know, it's DCC shall not deter development, and I think, you know, if we're in that kind of range, that's pretty typical. Then I think that's a justifiable rate.
Okay, thank you. The representative from the Victoria Residential Builders Association was there as well, and he noted this was a big hit at one time, and with Step Code 3 as a requirement, he was concerned about these extra costs. Do you recall how you replied to him?
The chair to Councillor Bateman. I don't recall, but you know, it's again going back to the sustainability of kind of the infrastructure and services being provided, and I'm not sure exactly what I stated back, but you know, step code is a separate process, and it does add an extra cost. But you know, in terms of the DCCs, it's really looking at a different, you know, a different issue. It's about servicing sustainability, it's about financial sustainability for the districts, and it's about cost sharing, you know, the required services to support that growth. And when we look at DCCs, it's like, it's not developer pay, it's developer share. Everything in this program is actually being cost shared, most of it. There's very few items that are 100% being paid for that development community. So it is their fair share of the infrastructure and services required to support, you know, the growth they're driving and the benefit that they receive from that development. So yes, with step code, that's, you know, an additional challenge and a consideration. But you know, I think it's kind of a separate point from kind of having that sustainable and financially and sustainable infrastructure program and implementation.
Okay. Just for what you replied, in terms of a big hit, given that it's been 12 years or 9 years in the two major cases, with a review every 3 to 5 years, it won't be such a big hit next time, right? So we're creating some certainty. Maybe. Oh, okay.
Through the chair to...
I wonder.
Through the chair to Councillor Bateman. Yeah, and that's exactly it, right? We look at 2004 to now and the amount of, inflation and changes in costs. I mean, when you look at 108% or, for multifamily, I think we're at 36%. Within that range, in the amount of time that's passed, it's actually not that much of an increase if we actually think about it that way, and add all those costs into it. To that point, and that was something that I provided my presentation for that reason, was looking back at my notes from that did come to the top, and that's something we hear often. It's better to do it more frequently and have kind of more involvement and more of a discussion as it's kind of going through and being updated. And, instead of having 100% changes, you're doing it kind of 10, 15, 20% at a time rather than bigger swings, right?
Okay. Couple more, if you don't mind. I'm curious about your timeline population and growth estimates. Now, you're anticipating growth in the district of approximately 2,300 housing units by 2040. Now, that number is not consistent with the numbers in our draft OCP, which indicates that we're going to have 1,800 more homes by 2030. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Paolo. And then an additional 1,700 over the following decade? Approximately. Not quite? Are these numbers consistent, is what I'm seeking clarity on.
So currently, we're showing in the graph in the draft OCP about 5,000. Zoomed out. 2016 current demand. Touchscreen. It's very sensitive.
So I should have looked this up beforehand.
Okay, so 2030 unit demand projections, what are we looking at there? Just short of 2,000, and then 2040, what are we looking at here? 3,500-ish. And sorry, what was the latest horizon date that you were?
So that was 2,000 more by 2030 and an additional 3,500 on top of that by 2040? Or is that 3,500 total?
Total.
Total, okay. So there's that discrepancy between the 2,300 in your calculation and the 3,500 in the draft OCP. And I'm just curious about that because, yeah.
So should they not be the same? Right?
Both guesses.
They're both estimates.
Right.
Yeah,
was
projections
right
being
in 20
developed
years.
at different times in processes.
Through the chair to Councillor Bateman, if I may. So there is probably a difference in projections, and we did not have the OCP projections when we did our calculations, and they're based on projections that are in the TMP, and those are coordinated too, and the projections we have are also coordinated with the projections from CRD, Integrated Water Services, so there's alignment in the DCCs. I will also note that growth in the DCCs and growth in the OCP, there's good reasons maybe for them to be different in some cases. One's looking at future land use, whereas we want the connection and growth to DCCs to be tied to the infrastructure we're providing. So if you're going to add a lot more population, this is kind of what we're getting at, Director Carter's getting at with potential additional updates, is that if you're going to add new people, there needs to be the infrastructure to support that too. So having the alignment between those things is important, and I'd also suggest that with DCCs, it's probably because it's equaling a rate and you're, you're doing financial planning around this for infrastructure, it's probably better to be conservative on population than kind of overestimate, because it's better to kind of, I guess, over-collect than under-collect.
Okay. So my final question. Well, DCC credits, Jim Hartshorn from West Hills was very emphatic. It's the most important thing following adoption is a latecomer and a DCC credit policy, right? So that'll happen. And my final comment regards and question to staff is, where is this here? Yeah, the DCC reductions bylaw, this option is not recommended by staff, I believe, is what I'm reading here. So the question would be, then how do we as a municipality encourage those 4 classes of eligible development? Not-for-profit rental housing, for-profit affordable rental housing, small lot subdivisions, and developments designed to result in a low environmental impact. So are there other strategies we can use to encourage those?
Through your worship to Councillor Bateman, wouldn't be recommended to initiate right away, and not for small lot subdivisions. If council wished to provide reductions for affordable housing and other types of development, that would be more so supported by staff. But ultimately, the profit margin is so high to develop, and so people are making money. If you, developers always say, well, we'll pass off the increases to the buyers, but do the developers, my question back to that, pass off the profits to the buyers too? They don't in all cases. If you had to look at, just as a simple comparison, as what the housing prices have done in the last year within Souk, I would say that the profit margins are probably 100 to 200% higher than the total DCCs that are having to be paid for any of the developments in units. So at this time, it wouldn't be highly recommended from staff to look at further reductions on those unless there's particular cases for affordable housing that council wanted to consider.
Okay, thank you. My job as devil's advocate is done.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman. Just in that, where you said the DCC reduction policy will follow, that's where I'm like, well, hold on, maybe. And I think that's a discussion that needs to come, and then where would it be appropriate? And I tend to agree. If we're focused on, like the Search and Project that didn't receive a grant, for example, that makes sense. It's not for profit, it's community-led, it's in the service town center area, but not on small lot. I mean, I don't even want to wade into that debate. So I just want to say, like, to anyone that's watching, like, while Mr. Hartshorn may appreciate seeing that, he's a developer, he's profit-driven, and that's all fine. But we also have to build a community that's sustainable, that we can afford to all live in after we buy here, really. And to keep the infrastructure current. I mean, you read what happens when you don't, and we know what the situation is. It just gets more expensive.
Okay.
Councillor St. Pierre?
2 things. One is a comment. I believe that we can't actually specifically change DCCs for one specific project. It has to be across the board, and that can be confirmed. So, for example, Search-and couldn't be the sole recipient of a DCC reduction. It would have to be some kind of umbrella for affordable housing projects, I believe.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor St. Pierre. If you were to create a DCC reduction bylaw, you would define the categories which would receive reductions, the proportion of reduction they receive, 100%, 50%, and then a definition for what would meet that meet that for reduction. So, if it's affordable housing, it could be 15% below market rates. It could be a lot of different things, and depending on that definition, can have a pretty substantial impact on finances and how many units that would qualify for that too. And, I would suggest there are other tools and mechanisms beyond a DCC reductions bylaw that can be used for things like affordable housing. And then back to the small lot point and development designed to result in low, greenhouse gas emissions. It's trying to connect that tangible benefit that they're receiving from a reduction to like a reduced impact on infrastructure would be kind of another test I would look at.
And the second thing was, I was thinking I would actually move the motion.
Yeah, so I'll come to you at the appropriate time, okay? Just one last question that I have for Seth. We don't have a DCC reduction bylaw in place right now.
That's correct, we do not.
Okay, so in times where council has offset the DCCs, that's just been the whim of council at the time. There's no policy that does it, it's just been, because I know that maybe not this council, but councils have granted, I guess, because we can't waive the DCCs. We provided a grant in lieu of, because we certainly have done that for some of the projects. But they've all been rental projects, as far as I can remember. Yeah, like maybe the Knox Vision project, the Hope Center, I think, came to mind. And then can we charge DCCs to, like BC Housing, being a provincial crown? We can?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's part of the reason why staff isn't recommending going into reduction bylaws right now, because like as Mr. Heffernan says, you set the criteria, but they kind of have to be across the board. Where there's other mechanisms, I don't know what council has done in the past, but if they can approve certain amounts of funding for a specific development, but they still are required to pay their DCCs, you can be more strategic in what you're choosing, I guess. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, from stepping on my toes with rules here.
Nope. Yeah, sorry, through the chair. I think, there's other tools, and I think that's what the discussion is, really. And if you're going to set that umbrella one, it's if you're going to provide a reduction in DCCs, it should be through a bylaw, and that's consistent for every applicant that meets that definition. I think that's just transparency and fairness. But that being said, if it's more specific or one specific development, then maybe there's a different tool.
Okay. No, that's great. Thank you very much, Mr. Heffernan, for all the work you've done on this and the report, and for all our questions. I sort of feel that we have like a friend on our side when we get hit with local governments making it all, like just all the, maybe not in that tone, but with all the pieces of driving development away when we know there's intense desire to build here. There is a lot of demand to build in Souk right now, and it's costing the taxpayers, really, to provide all the development. It doesn't make sense. So this is long overdue. So thank you for the work, and Mr. Carter as well.
And without the appropriate fees in place, development will sprawl. They will develop as fast as possible, which we can see from our influx of applications. They're going through the roof. With accurate cost bylaws in place, the development will be more sustainable.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Okay, so here we have our recommendation. It's broken into two parts, so we'll do them both separately. So the first one is that council give first, second, and third readings to development cost charge bylaw number 2021, bylaw 2021 number 775. So moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Bateman. Any further to add? Anything to add? Anyone wants to speak? Nope. Call a question. All in favor then? That's unanimous. Thank you. The next part, and that council directs staff to submit the development cost charge program and bylaw to the ministry for review and endorsement. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor McMath. All those in favor? None opposed, so that's unanimous. Mr. Carter, can you turn off your microphone? And number two, that council receive the urban systems development cost charge background report for information. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Beddoes. If we could please have the PowerPoint distributed, that would be great. There's a lot of good pieces in there. All those in favor, please. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you for staying with us. Please join us for the rest of the meeting. And that's the criteria of presenting. No, I'm fine. Safe travels on the road. No. Okay. There has been a request for a 5-minute break, so I think that's a good idea, and then we'll come back in 5. It's 9:49, so say 9:55, and then we'll carry on with item 11.3. moved to follow, or pardon me, 11.2 is to follow 11.4, so that puts us at 11.3, which is the sewer use amendment bylaw number 827 and business license amendment bylaw number 828 for mobile food vendors. So we have a pretty straightforward report here, but I'll turn it over to staff just to present what you need to.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. So as noted in the title, there are two separate bylaw amendments proposed today. The issue that we are attempting to solve is related, which is why they are put together. They are both as a result of business practices that have been observed by staff in the community, where mobile businesses are adding non-mobile structures and connecting to permanent infrastructure. In doing so, these businesses are no longer mobile in the way that the business license bylaw intends, and they're operating in a bit of a regulatory gray area. By recommending changes to both the business license bylaw and the sewer use bylaw, staff are addressing two specific issues that have arisen. So the first one is a need to further define mobile as it relates to mobile food vendors. And the second one is protection of the municipal sewer system specifically from unauthorized use. The first issue is addressed by expanding upon the definition of mobile food vendor in the business license bylaw. In order to avoid food truck permanency, some municipalities require that vendors change locations on a set schedule, for example, a maximum of 5 consecutive days in one spot. When considering changes to SUC's definition, staff didn't feel that regular location changes were an issue that needed to be addressed at this time, but rather the intention is that businesses must remain self-contained and able to move locations. In other words, they shouldn't be permanently connected to one spot. If food trucks do wish to establish a permanent location, both landowners and business operators would need to follow any applicable development procedures that would apply. The second issue to be addressed is unauthorized connection to the district's sewer. While the sewer use bylaw contains general provisions that prohibit this, there are no specific requirements for mobile food vendors. Using the existing format of the sewer use bylaw, which includes practices that must be followed by 11 other specific types of businesses, staff are proposing that truly mobile food vendors be required to adhere to a code of practice that states that they must dispose of their wastewater in a sani dump facility equipped to handle such discharge, and that they must keep a record to demonstrate compliance with this requirement. These two bylaw amendments will further clarify requirements for mobile food vendors, and both bylaws are presented for first through third reading. The district is required to give public notice before amending the business license bylaw, and this can be done in any manner that council deems reasonable. Standard practice for non-controversial changes is to advertise in 2 consecutive editions of the Sauk News Mirror and provide an opportunity for folks impacted by the bylaws to address council at an upcoming meeting. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Temple. Just a question would be, is there a fine if a business is not complying? So it states in here that the logbook would have to be available for inspection, but in the event that someone is caught discharging into the wastewater plant or failure to produce such, is there also a subsequent penalty attached?
There is. So the sewer use bylaw was adopted in 2005 and doesn't contain provisions for ticketing using the municipal ticketing information system. It does have the ability to do a long form prosecution, which can be a bit lengthier of a process, but the requirement to comply with Section 52 of the bylaw around maintaining your wastewater would be, if a business wasn't complying with that, it would be grounds to suspend a business license or to fine them under the business license bylaw, which does contain MTI provisions.
Good. Questions? Councillor St. Pierre?
Through your worship to staff, I was just curious about something that seemed to have been implied in the report, which is, have there been instances of vendors putting oil into the wastewater system? Is that what we're looking at here? Is that what we're trying to prevent? And if that's actually been happening, what are the consequences to our system?
That is, in fact, what we are trying to prevent. As to consequences to the system, I can get Director Carter to speak to that.
Through your worship to Councillor St. Pierre, huge impacts to the system. It throws off all the treatment processes in the plant with any substantial amount of grease that goes in there. Basically keeps all particles suspended, and it doesn't allow us to treat wastewater. It can have 10 to hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of implications. So we want to try and avoid grease at all costs going into our system. And we have found in some circumstances very evident large amounts of grease going into the system.
Thank you very much.
Okay, other questions? Councillor Bateman.
So in terms of, through you to staff, to Mr. Carter, Santa dumps, are these the same as the RV Santa dump they can go to?
Through your worship, Councillor Bateman, yes, that's correct, and there is a sandy dump in, I believe, French Beach.
Right.
Other mobile vendors, one's existing in Souk, they call for a mobile truck septic company to come pump out. Typically, containments can last, depending on the size of them, a week to 3 weeks to 4 weeks worth of use before they need to get someone to come out.
And is this a current practice, a general practice at the moment?
It's a general practice for a few of them that actually have tanks on board for them to come out and do it, yeah.
Right, okay,
Yes.
thank you. That's good.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, there's a recommendation here. So first off is that council give first, second, and third reading to the bylaw cited as sewer use amendment bylaw number 827-224-01, 2021. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Logans. Any discussion? I'll just add, I'm glad to see this, and I hope that if, I'm not keen on issuing any permission to operate in a park, if I see that our waste, if someone is offending by abusing the system, it kind of defeats the whole purpose. Councillor St. Pierre?
I will make one small comment, and that's that I hope that along with some of this, there'll be information to the vendors that they can actually potentially have their oils recycled elsewhere, because there are programs for doing that sort of thing. Way better than putting it into our systems, and possibly better than putting it in a sandy flush.
Absolutely. Okay. All those in favor, please? And that's unanimous. Thank you. The next part is that council give first, second, and third reading to the bylaw cited as business license amendment bylaw number 828-778-01, 2021. That's moved by Councillor Bateman and seconded by Councillor Beddoes. Any comments? Nope. 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 All those in...
Gratitude for our food trucks, by the way.
Pardon me?
Gratitude for the food trucks of Souk. They are...
I'm grateful to those that are not abusing our wastewater system.
That too. Some very
Because
fine
it's-
food available in our trucks these days.
Something you learn at an early age is not to pour grease down the sink.
Yeah.
So somehow opening up the sewage and pouring it straight in just violates all of that. I almost fell out of my chair. Okay. Do we hand them all empty milk cartons to pour it in? Store it, not pour it? Like it's been around for a long time. Anyway, stop. All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. And lastly, in that council directs staff to give notice of the proposed bylaw change in accordance with section 59 of the community charter. So it's moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Beddoes. In terms of notice, though, if there's some way of if we know who some of, like sending out a letter, just, hey, this is happening, to some of the mobile food owners. I mean, they may not want to pay for the removal, but that's the cost of doing business. It's what a restaurant has to pay for and do. So we have to provide a fair playing field, and we also need to preserve our system. It's just not designed for that. Yeah, I don't think there any warning. I don't know. I'm just frustrated. Okay, all those in, yes?
I was just going to ask.
Go ahead, microphone.
Oh, sorry. Just a quick question. Where in this community can you dispose of, deep fat fryer grease? I have 10 cases of it to get rid of.
Oh, my God.
17 liters a case. Anybody?
Worship to Councillor Beddoes. I don't know if there's a specific place for it. I know a lot of people in the interior, there was a lot of people that actually made diesel out of cooking fat, oil, and grease, and they would readily take it. I don't know if there's anyone undertaking those activities in Souk.
We used to put it behind Buffy's when they had a restaurant, which they didn't mind because they had somebody come and collect it. But I've got, no, I was very overt about it. It's okay. I just wondered if there was a place, or I heard Councillor St. Pierre said that, it is a desirable item for some people, and I'd like to be connected to somebody, and I guess, like I say, I got quite a bit of it.
You may want to reach out to some of the restaurants. There was at one point, I remember a delegation came to council, and it was exactly that. It was a company that collected the grease and made it into some kind of fuel, biodiesel, like a fuel for vehicles. And then there was sort of the comment that your vehicle smells like French fries sometimes, but, yeah, which is fine. So I just don't remember the name of the organization. Ms. Temple knows that name.
They were called Cowichan Energy Alternatives, and they were from Duncan.
Cowichan Energy Alternatives, and then that's where some restaurants, I think, even had some bins that they would pour everything in, it would be picked up. So that's something, it's something to look into.
Well, I go up that way occasionally, I could take it up.
There you go. Okay, Councillor Logans.
I know that you did mention asking restaurants, but I also know that some restaurants just dump it in their parking lot. So it could be a communication piece for our Climate Action Committee as well.
Great, so put it in the storm drains, because all drains lead to the ocean. So that just, I won't start. I'll call the question. All those in favor, please. Oh, unanimous, thank you. So our next item up is 11.4, Community Parks Regulation Amendment Bylaw. So there's also the supplemental information that came in. So this has been on the docket for a while there. But we have our report is to deal with sort of the light uses of the park. It's in another piece here. So the recommendation, anyway, I'll just ask if there's any questions about the report. Councillor Logans?
I have a bit of a question. I don't know how answerable it is, but through you to staff, in terms of like low impact, when we're having food trucks in parks, is the $20 an hour fee or quarterly fee, is that going to cover like when there's an accidental scuff on the grass that we have to fix, or like increased garbage pickup in the parks?
I think where this came about was not so much the mobilization of food trucks, but it was more outdoor fitness activities like yoga or, it's not fusion, Zumba, and,
Any number of fitness activities.
yes, cross-training, those sorts of things. I don't think we repair a curve anywhere. Yeah, so it's more related to sort of and like an hour, that's why there's kind of a more broken down time, because some of the groups just meet for an hour and then they're gone. Yeah, okay. So the recommendation here is that council give first, second, and third reading to the bylaw cited as Community Parks Regulation Amendment Bylaw number 823-101-6/2021. Moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor Logans. Any comments? Councillor Bateman, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just say thank you to staff for making that definition, and at least in item 1 on this 5-part amendment, and also to staff for identifying the time they're putting into these applications and the fact that you're being underpaid and your costs are not being covered. So great to see that due diligence. Thank you.
Excellent. Call the question. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. So now we go back to 11.2, which is the fees and charges bylaw. So the other one needed to be amended, otherwise this one doesn't need to change, right? But now that it's done, that's what we're doing. Okay, so we have the report here. Any questions? No, it's pretty straightforward. So the recommendation is that council give first, second, and third reading to the bylaw cited as fees and charges amendment, bylaw number 824-752-04, 2021. Moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so then onwards to 11.5, checkout bag regulation bylaw. This has been a long time coming, and here it is. I note that many of our locals have already made the changes.
It's kind of good timing, because in COVID, we couldn't bring our bags into the store. And who knows, but you can bring them in now. Anyway, questions for our staff? Okay, so I'll move the recommendation, and that is that council give first and second reading to the bylaw cited as checkout bag regulation bylaw number 831, 2021. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Logans. Any comments? Go ahead.
Yes, first of all, I'm really grateful this has come forward. The other thing was simply that in the report, there were 3 options, and one of them was actually, given that we now have larger jurisdiction in terms of these particular single-use plastics, to send some of this back to potential Climate Action Committee to get recommendations on further single-use plastics that we might want to include. I don't think that's what we need to be doing right now, but, and I'd like to have this motion dealt with first, but I'd like to actually talk about that as well.
Okay. So we've moved and seconded this, first part, or we've moved first and second reading, correct? Got it. Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Bateman.
Yeah, but just as a comment, just to note that Zero Waste Souk first presented this request to council back in 2017. That was following its Bring Your Own Bag, BYOB, signage campaign. And, you know, we had a series of steps as outlined here. I think the great news was that Village Foods and Western Foods voluntarily banned plastic bags on January 1st, 2020 because, quote, it's the right thing to do, said Wayne Nishaw and Buzz Miriam. And, of course, then COVID struck and all bets are off. So here we are. You know, we're coming post-COVID, and 6 months from now, I think, if I read this right, we'll at least have that plastic bag bylaw. But then, as Councillor St. Pierre says, the province has given us options to look at straws, foam takeout containers, and plastic utensils. And there are some great examples right now in the province. There are 12 communities in BC who have adopted various bylaws, many of them just plastic, some with foam containers and plastic straws. And the example of Chilliwack has a very interesting policy. So we could borrow and look at. So I agree with Councillor St. Pierre that there's option 2, give first and second reading, and this is the second part of the motion, and refer it to the CEDC and the CAC for recommendations.
Okay, so we have first and second on the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's vote that.
Let's deal with this. Councillor Beddoes?
No, I was just going to make a comment on Councillor Bateman's comment and St. Pierre's. Having bought supplies this last while for, I noticed that there wasn't plastic alternatives available at the wholesaler. So the industry is moving in great leaps and bounds, and I'm not so sure, you know, see how it goes, but I think the industry is going to take care of that. I think even anything you get in takeout now, a lot of them are going to these biodegradable, and you saw it with the pancake breakfast. All of that was compostable. So I'm really pleased that society is moving in that direction. So we're with the times. Just a comment.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree that even finding a plastic straw is nearly impossible. I have a child who likes straws, and they're all paper or reusable. So part of it is, if it's already happening, why do we need to spend time?
True. Yeah.
And I get it, there's some few stragglers here, but really, it's what you got. So that's good. Well said. Okay, call a question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. And the second part is that council provides staff with direction as to next steps for public notice and consultation. I think it's long overdue because it's already happening within Souk, so I think it's the usual course of notification. There are still plastic bags at the grocery stores you're offered, so this will make it more of a change. But elsewhere, it's, if you don't say you need a bag, you don't get one. You just have to carry all your groceries loosely to the car. So, or pay for one after the fact. Okay, so this part here, these are the options. Okay. All right, council, I think it's advertised given that this is already happening, to do the consultation, it seems long
it's done because the industry is already moving in that way. So just suggest that Councillor X staff to advertise the proposed checkout bag regulation bylaw on a public input opportunity. Please back up. At an upcoming council meeting in 2 consecutive editions of the Souk News Mirror. Moved by Councillor McMath, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. All those in favor? Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. And then I think in terms of the work of this CDC and climate action, you guys have better, like, you have other work to get on with rather than battling the straw, which is already paper. Okay. 11.6, so we're moving into adoption now. 11.6 is that council adopt the bylaw cited as Affordable Housing Agreement 2038, Gatewood Road, bylaw number 812, 2021. Move adoption by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor St. Pierre. All those in favor? Opposed? That's unanimous. A lot of discussion has already happened at the other readings. Next one, 11.7, this is that council adopt the bylaw cited as Officer and Delegation of Authority Amendment, bylaw number 821, 672-4, 2021. Adoption moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Logans. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Lastly is permissive taxes. That is that council adopt the bylaw cited as Permissive Tax Exemption Amendment, bylaw number 825, 792-01, 2021. Moved by Councillor St. Pierre, seconded by Councillor Lajeunesse. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so we have no new business for 12, nothing for 13. That brings us to council verbal reports, of which I have nothing to share. I'll move to ask members of council. Go ahead, Councillor Bailey.
Okay, so on this coming Saturday, we have the Souk Homelessness Coalition strategic plan meeting at the Baptist Church. All of council is invited. It'll be, So I attended the CRD Governance Committee. Good news is that the new budget, which will be presented to the CRD Board at the Committee of the Whole on October 27th, will stay within the cost of living, which last I looked was 4.1% year to year in August. And likewise, Viral, the Vancouver Island Regional Library Board of Trustees meeting, we settled on a levy increase of 3.84%, which approximates to, I can't remember, what? I can't remember. It's not a significant amount. The good news is that they're going to continue the freeze on children's fines and also on adult fines. So that's significant for scofflaws. Yeah, that's everybody. And there's lots of other things I could say, but I'll stop there.
Other members of council? Councillor Beddoes. We were just looking at C-Park.
Yeah, we had our C-Park budget meeting, and it was quite an interesting one because C-Park is recovering from the COVID. Revenues are down, and yet our facilities are open for the most part. So unfortunately for this upcoming year, the rate increase will be 11% range as it sits now. Fortunately, the year after in the 5-year plan, it drops down to 2.2 or 2.3. But it's going to take a hit this year, and it was just basically recovering from COVID. We have not had the revenue, and our costs have gone up with all the extra cleaning and things. So it was a little bit of a disappointment, but basically the commission saw that we really didn't have much choice in the matter, and it's a 1-year only bump, and next year we can get back to some realistic increases. So that's it.
Yeah, I'll just add to that also when you look at C-Park comparing, 2022 over 2021, when the facility is practically shut, then of course there's a big increase. But what we want to do is assume reopening and the resumption of many services that have since been canceled. So when you look at how it would play out with a future year, it's actually more where it should be. and as opposed to going from nothing and having to resume. The recreation is so important to our community, and every program is highly demanded, high demand, waitlisted, and it's still not operating on full capacity, right? There's still the arena, and skating is still half capacity, swimming closed on Sunday and so forth. So it still has all the costs, though, of running these necessary services, but it's getting the rest of it back online. But on another note, golf is on until November the 15th. I seem to have written that down.
And talk about, sorry, if I could continue on in that vein, the golf course has been a huge success. I think our revenue is up 20%. That's the one thing that did shine, and again, COVID-related, outdoors activity. And the report from staff there, they felt that this trend would continue, that people have sort of rediscovered golf, even just a small course, mind you. But, yeah, they like it, and they want that in their community at the moment. So.
We don't need to build another golf course. I think it's just when folks play at our course, it's well done. It's a good course. It's it's really well put together for a par 3. So, and hopefully some of the parking congestion will ease up in that area. Many folks had to not carpool, but drive separately to be able to play, whereas now folks are beginning to carpool, and that's helping address some of the congestion. The bike park is also seeing really strong activity as well, which is really good. Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Beddoes. Anything from anyone else? So on that note, I'd like to thank our member of the public for staying with us the entire time. Thank you. And on that, I'll call for a motion to adjourn. Oh, Ms. Temple? Oh, we have a Horizon report. And that is that council directs staff to draft a parks naming policy for council consideration in accordance with recommendations from the Parks and Trails Master Plan. Thank you very much for that. That's the release of a closed meeting item. Should have read my notes. So now I'll call for a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor McMath. As always, great to see you all. Be safe out there. Stay well. Keep in touch. All that good stuff. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you.